Rain hammered the shipping docks like bullets, turning concrete black beneath dying floodlights. Between rusted cargo containers, trauma nurse Selena Valles found the East Coast's most feared mafia boss bleeding out, his men too terrified to move him. She saved Massimo De Luca's life with trembling hands and a tiny flashlight. Hours later, he opened his eyes and sneered, "I'd never touch a woman like you." His soldiers laughed. Selena left behind an ultrasound photo and vanished carrying his unborn child. If you want to know how a broken nurse and a ruthless king collide in blood, betrayal, and impossible redemption, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down in sheets so thick Selena could barely see 3 feet ahead. Water poured off the brim of her canvas jacket, soaking through to her scrubs underneath as she picked her way across the shipping yard. Her medical bag weighed heavy against her hip. 12 hours at the refugee intake center had left it stuffed with blood-stained gauze and empty morphine vials that rattled with each step. She shouldn't have taken the shortcut through the docks. Everyone knew that. But the buses had stopped running an hour ago, and her apartment was still 2 miles away through streets that grew meaner after midnight. Thunder cracked overhead. The floodlights mounted on rusted cargo containers flickered once, twice, then settled into a sickly yellow glow that barely penetrated the downpour. Selena kept her head down, boots splashing through puddles that reflected nothing but darkness. That's when she heard the gunshot. The sound split the night, sharp and final, followed by shouting in a language she didn't understand. Italian, maybe, or something close to it. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to get as far from that sound as humanly possible, but her feet had already stopped moving. Another shout, closer this time. Then the unmistakable sound of someone choking on their own blood. Selena's hands were already moving toward her bag before her brain caught up. Stupid. This was monumentally stupid. She should be running. But 6 years in field hospitals across 3 war zones had rewired something fundamental in her nervous system. When she heard someone dying, her body simply moved. She ducked between 2 shipping containers, following the sound. The rain muffled everything, turning the maze of steel boxes into a confusion of echoes and shadows. Then she saw the light, a cluster of flashlights cutting through the storm, all pointed at the ground, at the man lying in a spreading pool of blood. There were maybe 8 of them standing in a loose circle, big men in expensive suits that were rapidly being destroyed by the rain. All of them had guns. All of them looked absolutely terrified. The man on the ground wore a suit that probably cost more than Selena made in 6 months. Even soaked and ruined, she could tell it had been tailored to perfection. Dark hair plastered to his skull, face contorted in pain, and a hole in his chest just below the heart that was pumping blood with each heartbeat. "Someone do something!" one of the men shouted. Heavy accent, definitely Italian. "We move him, he dies," another one answered. "The bullet's too close." "Then get a doctor." "Where? You want to call 911? Explain this?" They were going to let him die. Selena could see it happening in real time, the paralysis of men who knew that any action might be worse than inaction. The wounded man's breathing was getting shallower. His lips were turning blue. She should walk away. Right now. Turn around and pretend she'd seen nothing. Instead, she stepped into the circle of light. Move. 8 guns swung toward her face. Selena's heart tried to climb out through her throat, but she kept her hands visible, her voice steady. "I'm a nurse. Trauma specialist. If you want him to live through the next 10 minutes, you need to move. Now." For 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, nobody moved. Then one of the men, older with silver in his hair and a scar across his jaw, barked something in Italian. The guns lowered, slightly. Selena dropped to her knees beside the wounded man, rain immediately soaking through her pants. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd thought. Maybe 35. Strong jaw. The kind of face that would be handsome if it wasn't currently gray with blood loss. His eyes opened. Dark. Almost black. And even half dead, there was something predatory in the way they focused on her. "Who?" He tried to speak, but blood bubbled at his lips. "Don't talk!" Selena was already pulling supplies from her bag. Gloves, gauze, hemostatic agent, her tiny pen light. "This is going to hurt worse than getting shot. Try not to pass out." She didn't wait for permission. Her hands moved with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done this 100 times in worse conditions. She packed the wound with gauze, applied pressure, felt for the bullet. Too deep. Way too deep. The slug had missed his heart by maybe 2 centimeters and lodged against something, bone or cartilage, she couldn't tell in this light. The man's back arched. A sound came out of him that wasn't quite human. "Hold him down," Selina snapped. "If he moves, this goes from bad to fatal." 3 of the suited men dropped down, pinning his shoulders and legs. Selina worked faster. The rain made everything slippery, blood mixed with water, creating a pink stream that ran off into the shadows. She needed better light. She needed a sterile environment. She needed a goddamn hospital. She had none of those things, so she worked with what she had. Determination, muscle memory, and a refusal to let anyone die in front of her. Not tonight. Not after the 14-year-old boy she'd lost last week, the one who'd bled out while she was still washing someone else's blood off her hands. The wounded man's eyes locked on hers. Even through the pain, there was something calculating in that stare, like he was memorizing her face for later. Selina ignored it. She had to extract the bullet or he'd go septic within hours. Her forceps probed deeper. The man bucked against the hands holding him down. Someone was praying in Italian, low and fast and desperate. "Got it," Selina breathed. The bullet came free with a wet sound that made her stomach turn even after all these years. She dropped it into the mud without looking at it. Now came the hard part, stitching him closed without proper equipment, in the rain, with nothing but a penlight held between her teeth. Her hands shook, not from fear, from exhaustion, from the adrenaline crash that always came after the crisis peaked, but she forced them steady, threading the surgical needle she'd been saving for emergencies. This definitely qualified. Each stitch had to be perfect. Too loose, and he'd tear open. Too tight, and she'd damage the tissue. The rain kept washing away the blood before she could see what she was doing. She worked by feel as much as sight, her fingers reading the terrain of his chest like braille. Somewhere in the middle of it, his hand found her wrist. The grip was weak but deliberate. When Selina glanced at his face, those dark eyes were still open, still watching. "Don't die on me," she heard herself say. "I didn't get soaked and threatened with 8 guns just to lose you now." Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his lips. Then his eyes rolled back and he went limp. "Is he—" one of the men started. "Unconscious. Better that way." Selina tied off the last stitch and sat back on her heels, breathing hard. "He needs a hospital, real antibiotics, monitoring. This is field medicine, not a miracle." The older man with the scar stepped closer. Up close, he smelled like expensive cologne and gun oil. "You saved his life." "I bought him time." "That's not the same thing." Selina started packing her supplies back into her bag with shaking hands. "Get him somewhere clean. Keep the wound dry. If he spikes a fever above 102, he needs IV antibiotics or he's dead anyway." "What's your name?" "Nobody." Selina stood up. Her knees popped. Everything hurt. "I was never here." "Mr. DeLuca will want to thank you." The name hit her like cold water. DeLuca. Massimo DeLuca. The name that showed up in whispered conversations at the hospital, in newspaper articles about organized crime, in the kind of stories that ended with bodies in the river. She'd just saved the life of the most dangerous man on the East Coast. "I don't want his thanks," Selina said quietly. "I just want to go home." The man studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Go. We were never here either." Selina didn't need to be told twice. She turned and walked back into the maze of shipping containers, forcing herself not to run. The rain had lightened to a drizzle. Behind her, she could hear the men talking in rapid Italian, organizing, planning, getting their boss somewhere safe. She made it 3 blocks before her legs gave out. She sat down on a bus stop bench and stared at her hands. Even in the dim streetlight, she could see blood under her fingernails. Massimo DeLuca's blood. The man who controlled half the criminal enterprises in the city. The man whose name made police captains nervous. The man she'd just stitched back together with thread from a field kit. Selina wanted to throw up. Instead, she stood up and started walking again. Her apartment was still a mile away. Dawn was maybe 3 hours off. She needed a shower, sleep, and about 12 hours to process what had just happened. She got none of those things. Because when she finally stumbled through her apartment door, stripped off her ruined clothes, and collapsed onto her bed, Her phone buzzed with a text from the refugee center. Explosion downtown, mass casualties, all medical personnel report immediately. Selena closed her eyes for exactly 30 seconds. Then she got dressed again and went back to work. 3 weeks passed before she thought about that night on the docks again. The story had made the news, of course. Vague reports about a gang-related incident near the shipping yards. No casualties reported, which meant someone had cleaned up very thoroughly after she left. The police investigation went nowhere. These things never did when organized crime was involved. Selena tried to forget it, tried to go back to the rhythm of her life. 12-hour shifts at the center, grabbing sleep in 4-hour chunks, eating whatever food she could microwave in 3 minutes or less. The work was brutal, and the pay was barely enough to cover rent, but it was real. It mattered. Unlike the chaos of war zones where politics and tribal conflicts turned every patient into a political statement, here she could just practice medicine. Most days. The morning sickness started on a Tuesday. Selena made it through intake processing before she had to duck into the bathroom and lose her breakfast. She blamed the cafeteria food. Then it happened again Wednesday and Thursday. By Friday, she was standing in the staff bathroom staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, wondering how her life had just gotten infinitely more complicated. She was 26, single, and working a job that barely paid living wages. A baby was not in the plan, had never been in the plan. But the father, a doctor she'd met during a 3-month stint in Jordan, someone stable and kind who'd talked about marriage before their deployment ended and reality set in, was already back in Germany with his wife. A wife Selena hadn't known existed until she'd seen the Facebook photos. So that was that. She stared at the test for a long time, watching the pink lines blur through tears she refused to shed at work. Then she threw it away, washed her face, and went back to work. 4 months later, she'd almost convinced herself she could handle single motherhood. The morning sickness had faded. Her scrubs still fit if she didn't button them all the way. The refugee center's nurse manager had promised her maternity leave. Unpaid, but it was something. She'd started looking at cribs on Craigslist, calculating how much she could save if she stopped eating out entirely. She was making it work. Then Massimo De Luca walked into her refugee center on a Tuesday afternoon, and everything fell apart. Selena was in the middle of stitching up a 7-year-old boy's forehead, playground accident, nothing serious, when she heard the commotion in the waiting room. Raised voices, the sharp click of expensive shoes on linoleum. Then her supervisor stuck his head into the exam room, his face pale. "Selena, someone's here to see you. I'm with a patient, now." Something in his voice made her stomach drop. She finished the last stitch quickly, told the boy's mother to ice it for 20 minutes, then stepped into the hallway. Massimo De Luca stood in the middle of the waiting room like he owned it, which, knowing his reputation, he might. 3 men in dark suits flanked him, bodyguards, obviously. Everyone in the waiting room had gone silent, mothers clutching children closer, the staff frozen behind the reception desk. He looked different than he had on the docks, healthy, strong, the kind of man who commanded attention just by existing. Tailored suit, perfect hair, a face that belonged on magazine covers if magazines celebrated dangerous men. And when his eyes found Selena across the room, something predatory flickered in them. He remembered. "You." His voice carried across the space, smooth, cultured, nothing like the dying man who'd gripped her wrist in the rain. "We need to talk." Selena's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But she was surrounded by patients, by families, by people who depended on this place staying neutral ground. "I'm working," she said, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. "This won't take long." It wasn't a request. Selena glanced at her supervisor. He nodded once, a tiny, terrified movement. She understood immediately. This man had probably donated to the center, or his organization had. Either way, refusing him wasn't an option. She led him to the staff break room, closing the door behind them, alone with Massimo De Luca. Every part of her body was screaming danger. He studied her with the same calculating intensity she remembered from the docks. "You saved my life. I did my job. You're a trauma nurse working at a refugee center for poverty wages when you could be making 6 figures at any hospital in the city." He took a step closer. Selena held her ground. "That's not just a job. That's a choice." "What do you want?" To thank you, he reached into his jacket. Selina flinched. He pulled out an envelope and set it on the break room table. $200,000. More than adequate compensation for your service. Selina stared at the envelope like it might explode. I don't want your money. Everyone wants money. Not everyone. She met his eyes. Take it and leave. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or irritation. Men like him weren't used to being refused. You're pregnant, he said. The words hit her like a punch. Selina's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, still barely showing under her loose scrubs, but apparently not invisible enough. That's none of your business. The father? Massimo's eyes tracked her reaction with unsettling precision. He's not in the picture. It wasn't a question. Leave. Now. Selina moved toward the door. Before I call security. This center doesn't have security. His voice remained calm, factual. And even if it did, do you really think they'd stop me? He was right. The knowledge sat in her chest like a stone. Massimo moved past her, headed for the door. Then he paused, so close she could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive that probably cost more than her monthly rent. You're proud, he said quietly. I respect that. But pride doesn't pay hospital bills or buy formula. When reality hits and you need help, he tapped the envelope still sitting on the table. You know where to find me. Then he was gone, his bodyguards falling into formation around him as he strode out of the center. The waiting room seemed to exhale collectively. Selina stood frozen in the break room, staring at the envelope. She should throw it away, burn it, anything but keep it. Instead, she picked it up, shoved it into her bag, and went back to work. That night, alone in her apartment, she opened the envelope. 20 neat stacks of $100 bills. More money than she'd ever seen in one place. Enough to cover prenatal care, delivery, 6 months of living expenses while she recovered. Blood money. Selina counted it twice, then hid it in a shoebox at the back of her closet. She wouldn't spend it. She just wouldn't throw it away either. 2 weeks later, she was doing intake on a Saturday afternoon when the news played on the waiting room TV. Breaking report. Explosion at a medical convoy near the Syrian border. 12 aid workers killed, including several American nurses. Names being withheld pending family notification. Selina's phone started buzzing, then ringing. Frantic calls from colleagues, from friends, from the international aid network she'd worked with for years. Someone had screwed up the casualty list. Her name was on it, listed among the dead. She spent 3 hours correcting the mistake, calling everyone she knew, posting on social media that reports of her death were greatly exaggerated. But rumors in tight communities had momentum. By Sunday evening, half the medical aid world thought she was dead. By Monday, Massimo De Luca thought so too. Selina found out from her supervisor, who'd received a massive donation to the center, along with a note expressing condolences for the loss of a talented nurse who gave her life in service. $10,000. In her name. From a man who'd spoken to her exactly once. She should have left it alone. Should have let sleeping dogs lie. But something about that donation made her angry, made her feel like a ghost, like she was being erased. So she did something monumentally stupid. She went to find him. The address wasn't hard to get. De Luca owned a dozen properties around the city, but only one was rumored to be his actual residence, a converted warehouse in the industrial district surrounded by enough security to guard a small country. Selina stood outside the gate on a Tuesday evening, staring up at razor wire and cameras. This was insane. This was how people disappeared. She pressed the intercom button anyway. State your business. The voice was flat, professional, bored. My name is Selina Velez. I need to see Mr. De Luca. Silence. Then, wait. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Selina was about to leave when the gate buzzed open. A man in a suit, one of the bodyguards from the refugee center, appeared and gestured for her to follow. They walked through a courtyard, past fountains and gardens that looked absurdly peaceful. The warehouse conversion was stunning. Exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of industrial luxury that cost millions. Everything tasteful, everything perfect, everything designed to intimidate. The bodyguard led her through a marble entryway and into a room that might have been an office or a throne room. Massive desk, leather chairs, original artwork on the walls. And standing by the window, silhouetted against the city lights, was Massimo De Luca. He turned when she entered. For 3 full seconds, he just stared at her like she was a ghost. "You're alive." "Disappointed?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "The news report was wrong." Selena stayed near the door, fighting the urge to run. "I'm not dead. I'm not a memorial fund, and I don't need your pity donations." Massimo crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopped 2 feet away, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The intensity in them made her breath catch. "You came here to tell me that?" His voice was quiet, dangerous. "To refuse money for a place that desperately needs it? I came here to remind you I'm a real person, not a charitable cause, not someone you can... You're pregnant." He said it again, but different this time, harder, and alone. "That's my problem." "Is it?" Massimo's gaze dropped to her stomach. She was 17 weeks now, still barely showing, but under the thin fabric of her dress, the only nice one she owned, there was no hiding it anymore. "The father? None of your business." "You saved my life. That makes everything about you my business." He moved closer. Selena's back hit the door. "You're too proud to accept help, too stubborn to admit you're drowning. I've seen it before. I know how this ends. You don't know anything about me. I know you work 70-hour weeks for barely minimum wage. I know you live alone in a studio apartment with broken heat. I know you eat 1 meal a day and give the rest to your patients." His hand came up, fingertips brushing the dark circles under her eyes. "I know you're killing yourself trying to be noble." Selena jerked away from his touch. "Get away from me." "Or what?" The question hung in the air. They both knew she had no power here, no leverage, nothing but the anger burning in her chest. Massimo stepped back. His expression shifted, closed off, cold. The warmth that had flickered there for a moment vanished completely. "My men will drive you home," he said. "Don't come back here." "Gladly." She was halfway to the door when he spoke again. "The baby's father, what happened?" Selena stopped. She should keep walking, should leave and never look back. But exhaustion made her honest. "He had a wife. I didn't know until it was too late." The silence that followed was heavy. When Selena glanced back, Massimo's face was unreadable. "Then he's a fool," he said quietly. Their eyes met across the room. For just a moment, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. 2 people who understood being alone in a room full of people. Then the moment shattered. "Marco will drive you," Massimo said, his voice turning businesslike. "And Selena?" He waited until she looked at him again. "The offer stands. When pride stops being enough, and it will, you know where to find me." Selena left without another word. She made it 4 more months before the emergency room bill broke her. Preeclampsia. 26 weeks pregnant, her blood pressure spiking so high the on-call doctor looked scared. They admitted her overnight for monitoring, pumped her full of magnesium sulfate that made her feel like she was dying, and sent her home with orders for bed rest and weekly checkups. The bill arrived 3 weeks later. $47,000. Her insurance, the bare minimum plan she could afford, covered maybe a third of it. Selena sat on her bathroom floor staring at the number and finally let herself cry. She spent the night trying to find options, payment plans, charity programs, anything. But the math was brutal and simple. She couldn't work the hours needed to pay this off and stay healthy enough to carry the pregnancy to term. At 2 in the morning, she pulled the shoebox from her closet. The $200,000 was still there. She'd never touched it. Blood money from a dangerous man who'd probably forgotten she existed. She counted out $50,000 and left the rest. Then she went to sleep and pretended she hadn't just sold another piece of her soul. The money was gone in 3 months. Hospital bills, prenatal vitamins, rent when the center cut her hours to part-time because she couldn't stand for full shifts anymore. Food, basic supplies for a baby she was starting to believe she'd never be able to properly provide for. By month 8, she was broke again, terrified, and so tired she could barely think straight. That's when the envelope appeared. Someone left it at the refugee center reception desk with her name on it. Inside, another $200,000 and a note in precise handwriting. "This is not charity. This is payment for a debt I can never fully repay. Use it. M." Selena sat in the break room, staring at the money, and realized she'd been naive. Massimo De Luca didn't forget. He kept track of his investments, and apparently she'd become one of them. The smart thing would be to refuse it, to give it back and maintain her independence. Instead, she kept it, because her baby was due in 6 weeks and she had $90 in her bank account. Pride, it turned out, was a luxury she could no longer afford. She gave birth on a Tuesday in early December, 37 weeks, 8 hours of labor that felt like dying. But when they finally placed her son on her chest, tiny and perfect and screaming his lungs out, something inside Selena cracked open. Love, pure and terrifying and absolute. She named him Gabriel, for strength, for survival, for the hope that he might have a better life than she could currently provide. The hospital social worker visited on day 2. Routine postpartum check-in, she said. But Selena recognized the assessment happening behind professional kindness. Single mother, low income, high-risk situation. They were making sure she was stable enough to take a baby home. She lied through her teeth and passed. They released her on day 3. Selena carried Gabriel out of the hospital in a second-hand car seat, got into an Uber because she couldn't afford a car, and took her son home to a studio apartment that suddenly felt even smaller. Reality hit like a freight train. Babies, it turned out, were expensive. Impossibly expensive. Diapers, formula, co-pays for the pediatrician. The heating bill that tripled because she had to keep the apartment warm enough for a newborn. Selena watched her savings hemorrhage with each passing week. By the time Gabriel was 6 weeks old, she'd burned through half of Massimo's money and still had no plan for returning to work. The refugee center couldn't hold her position indefinitely. Daycare cost more than she made. Her apartment had a no-children clause she'd been violating since day 1. She was drowning, and this time, there was no bottom in sight. The knock came on a Saturday morning. Selena was running on 3 hours of sleep, wearing a milk-stained shirt, bouncing Gabriel while he screamed through what she'd learned was purple crying, the phase where nothing helped, and you just had to endure. She almost didn't hear the knocking over the noise. She opened the door with Gabriel still wailing against her shoulder. Massimo De Luca stood in the hallway, looking completely out of place in his $1,000 suit among her building's peeling wallpaper and flickering lights. Their eyes met. "You're alive," he said, like he'd been expecting something different. "Why are you here?" Selena had to shout over Gabriel's crying. "May I come in?" Every instinct screamed no, but Gabriel was melting down. She was exhausted, and pride had stopped mattering somewhere around week 2 of sleep deprivation. She stepped aside. Massimo entered her tiny apartment, and she watched him take it all in with one sweeping glance. The laundry piled on the couch, the bottles drying on a towel, the bassinet shoved against the wall, the entire pathetic reality of her life condensed into 400 square feet. "The baby," he said. "Boy or girl?" "Boy, Gabriel. He's crying." Babies do that. Selena kept bouncing, kept swaying, kept doing the useless dance that sometimes helped and sometimes didn't. "What do you want?" Massimo moved closer, looked down at Gabriel's red, furious face. Something flickered in his expression, too fast to read. "Give him to me." "What?" "The baby. Let me try." It was such an absurd request that Selena actually laughed. But Gabriel was screaming himself purple, and her arms were dying, and exhaustion made her reckless. She transferred Gabriel to Massimo's arms, half expecting disaster. Instead, Massimo cradled him with surprising competence, supporting his head properly, holding him against his chest. He started walking, slow, steady circuits of the tiny apartment, and somehow, impossibly, Gabriel's screaming faded to hiccuping sobs. Then silence. Selena stared in disbelief as the most dangerous man on the East Coast soothed her son to sleep. "How did you—" "I had a nephew." Massimo's voice was quiet. "Long time ago. Before he died." The words landed heavy. Selena didn't ask for details. The look on Massimo's face said that door was closed and locked. He transferred Gabriel back to her arms carefully, like he was made of glass. The baby stayed asleep, finally peaceful against her shoulder. "You need help," Massimo said. "I'm managing." "You're destroying yourself." He gestured at the apartment, at her, at everything. "How long before you collapse? A month? 2? "That's my problem." "It's Gabriel's problem." The name sounded strange, in his mouth. You want to be noble. I understand that. But martyrs die, Selena, and then who takes care of your son? The truth of it hit her like a slap. She'd been so focused on surviving each day that she hadn't let herself think about the trajectory, about where this exhaustion led. What are you suggesting? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Massimo met her eyes. Come work for me. Doing what? What you do best. Medicine. I have people who need discreet medical care. No questions asked, cash payment. 3 times what you make at the center. It was a trap. Obviously a trap. Working for the mob, getting tangled in whatever darkness surrounded this man. But Gabriel was warm in her arms, and her bank account had $400 left, and the rent was due in 8 days. I need to think about it. You have 48 hours. Massimo pulled a card from his jacket pocket. Heavy stock, embossed letters, just a phone number. After that, the offer expires. He left without another word. Selena stood in her apartment, Gabriel sleeping peacefully against her chest, the card burning against her palm. She had 48 hours to decide between impossible choices. In the end, it took her 30, because Gabriel needed medicine she couldn't afford, and pride had officially become a luxury reserved for people with options. She called the number. Massimo answered on the first ring. Yes or no? Yes. Someone will pick you up tomorrow. 8 a.m. Bring the baby. Wait. But he'd already hung up. The car arrived exactly at 8. Black sedan, tinted windows. Driver who didn't speak beyond confirming her name. Selena strapped Gabriel's car seat into the back and tried not to think about what she'd just agreed to. They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city behind for suburbs that gradually transformed into something else entirely. Gated communities, private roads, the kind of wealth that didn't bother being ostentatious because it was too secure to need the performance. The car turned through iron gates into an estate that belonged in European aristocracy, not 20 miles outside a major American city. Manicured lawns, actual gardens, a mansion that somehow managed to be both intimidating and beautiful. The car stopped at the front entrance. The driver opened her door. Mr. DeLuca is expecting you. Selena unbuckled Gabriel, settled him against her hip, and followed another bodyguard inside. The entryway alone was bigger than her apartment. Marble floors, a staircase that curved upward like something from a movie, art on the walls that was probably worth more than she'd earned in her entire life. Massimo appeared at the top of the stairs. He'd traded the suit for dark jeans and a fitted black shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. He came down to meet her, his eyes going immediately to Gabriel. He's better? For now. Selena held her son a little tighter. What is this place? Home. Yours too, as of today. The words hit her like cold water. Excuse me? You can't do the job I need and commute 2 hours each way. You'll live here, both of you. He turned and started walking, clearly expecting her to follow. I've had a nursery prepared. Medical suite is on the 2nd floor. Your quarters are in the east wing. Selena stood frozen in the entryway. You want me to move in? Here? Did I stutter? That wasn't part of the deal. There was no deal. I made an offer. You accepted. The details are mine to define. He stopped at the base of the staircase, looking back at her. Would you rather drive 4 hours a day with an infant in the back seat? He had her. They both knew it. Selena followed him up the stairs, each step feeling like walking deeper into a trap she'd probably never escape. Massimo showed her to a suite that was bigger than her entire apartment had been. Bedroom, bathroom, sitting area, furniture that looked antique and expensive, windows overlooking gardens that probably required a full-time staff. The nursery. He opened a door off the bedroom. Selena's breath caught. The room was perfect. Not magazine perfect. Actually perfect. Crib with organic linens. Changing table stocked with supplies. A rocking chair positioned by the window. Blackout curtains. A white noise machine. Everything she'd priced online and couldn't afford. All of it here. Ready. Waiting. How did you... I have people. Massimo leaned against the doorframe, watching her take it in. You need to rest, to recover, to actually take care of yourself so you can take care of him. This is where that happens. Gabriel stirred against her shoulder, making tiny sounds. Selena swayed automatically. her body already trained to the rhythm. What exactly will I be doing? She forced herself to look at Massimo instead of the beautiful room. For you? Providing medical care for people who can't go to hospitals, stitching wounds, treating infections, handling emergencies. His eyes were flat, honest. Occasionally witnessing things you'll be required to forget. Mob doctor. Consultant. But yes. And if I refuse? If I want to leave? The silence that followed was heavy. Then you leave, Massimo said finally. I won't stop you, but you'll walk away from everything in this house. The safety, the security, the salary that would take you 10 years to earn anywhere else. All of it. So I'm trapped. You're employed. He pushed off the doorframe. The difference matters, at least to me. He left her alone then, closing the door quietly behind him. Selina stood in the perfect nursery, holding her sleeping son, and tried to figure out how her life had become something she no longer recognized. She'd saved a dying man in the rain. Now she was living in his mansion, on his payroll, surrounded by his protection and his expectations. All because she'd been too proud to accept help when she'd needed it most. And now that she'd finally accepted, she had no idea if she'd made a deal with the devil or just found the only way to survive. Outside the window, the garden stretched toward a horizon she could no longer see. The first 3 days, Selina barely left her suite. She told herself it was because Gabriel needed routine, because moving into a stranger's mansion required adjustment, because she was still recovering from months of survival mode and her body needed the sleep. All of it was true. None of it was the real reason. The real reason was that every time she stepped into the hallway, she felt the weight of eyes on her. Bodyguards stationed at corners, staff members who moved through the house like ghosts, and somewhere in this massive estate, Massimo De Luca, watching, waiting, expecting something from her she hadn't agreed to provide. On the 4th morning, someone knocked. Selina opened the door to find a woman in her 50s, dressed in simple black clothing, holding a breakfast tray. Mr. De Luca requests your presence in the medical suite. 1 hour. The woman's English carried a heavy Italian accent. I am Rosa. I help with the baby when you work. I didn't ask for... Mr. De Luca insists. Rosa set the tray on the sitting room table. Coffee, toast, fruit, real food, not the granola bars and instant oatmeal Selina had been living on for months. The baby, he is beautiful. I raised 4 sons. I know what to do. Before Selina could protest, Rosa was already moving toward the nursery where Gabriel was starting to fuss. Within seconds, the older woman had him changed, settled, and making happy sounds that weren't crying. Selina stood in the doorway feeling useless in her own life. Eat, Rosa said without looking up. You are too thin. The baby needs you strong. It wasn't a suggestion. Selina ate. Then she showered, dressed in clean scrubs that had appeared in her closet overnight, and made her way through the mansion's hallways following directions Rosa had rattled off in rapid-fire Italian-accented English. The medical suite occupied an entire wing on the 2nd floor. When Selina pushed through the double doors, she stopped dead. It looked like a private hospital. Exam tables, surgical lights, cabinets stocked with supplies she recognized from field hospitals and trauma bays, an autoclave, crash cart, monitors. Everything state-of-the-art and clearly expensive. Massimo stood near the windows, talking quietly with the older man Selina recognized from the docks, the one with the silver hair and scar. They both turned when she entered. Selina. Massimo's voice was professional, distant, nothing like the man who'd soothed her son to sleep. This is Antonio. He manages security and operations. Antonio nodded. His eyes assessed her with the cold efficiency of someone who'd spent a lifetime evaluating threats. The setup meets your standards? Massimo gestured at the equipment. Selina walked slowly through the suite, opening cabinets, checking supplies. Everything was organized exactly how she would have done it. Better, even. Someone who understood emergency medicine had stocked this room. It's perfect, she admitted. Too perfect. Who set this up? A former combat medic. He consulted on equipment. Massimo moved to one of the exam tables. Your first patient arrives in 20 minutes. Wait, what? Gunshot wound, through and through shoulder. Clean entry and exit, but he's been bleeding for 6 hours. My regular doctor is out of the country. Massimo's eyes locked on hers. Can you handle it? Every part of Selena wanted to say no, to walk out, to take Gabriel and run. Instead, she heard herself say, "Get him on the table. I'll need Antonio to assist." The patient arrived exactly on time. Early 20s, pale from blood loss, carried between two men who looked ready to kill anyone who let him die. They laid him on the exam table and stepped back. Selena snapped on gloves and went to work. The wound was ugly but manageable. The bullet had missed major arteries but torn through muscle. Someone had tried to pack it with gauze, badly, and the kid had lost more blood than necessary. Selena worked quickly, cleaning the wound, checking for debris, stitching the entry and exit with steady hands, while Antonio held the kid still. Massimo watched from across the room, silent, evaluating. 40 minutes later, Selena tied off the last stitch and stepped back. He needs antibiotics, broad spectrum, and someone needs to monitor him for infection. We have a recovery room. Massimo nodded to the men. They carried the kid out. Then it was just the three of them, Selena, Massimo, and Antonio. "You're good," Antonio said. First words he'd spoken. "Better than our last doctor." "What happened to him?" "Retirement." Antonio's expression suggested retirement wasn't voluntary. Selena stripped off her gloves, suddenly aware of how quiet the room had become. Massimo moved closer, studying her with that same calculating intensity. "This is what I need from you," he said. "People get hurt in my line of work. They can't go to hospitals, can't answer questions. You keep them alive. You keep them quiet. In return, you and Gabriel have everything you need. And if I refuse a patient, then you refuse. I'm not asking you to compromise your ethics." His jaw tightened. "Just your visibility." It was a thin line, a line Selena had already crossed the night she'd stitched him together on the docks. "How many patients?" "Maybe 5 a month, sometimes more, sometimes none." Massimo gestured toward the door. "Rosa has Gabriel. Take the afternoon. Rest. Tomorrow we discuss salary and expectations." He left before she could respond. Selena stood alone in the pristine medical suite, surrounded by equipment bought with criminal money, and tried to remember what her life had looked like before everything went sideways. She couldn't. The weeks blurred together. Selena treated knife wounds and broken bones, stitched cuts from bar fights and business disagreements, extracted a bullet from a man's thigh while he gripped the exam table and refused anesthesia, set a dislocated shoulder, treated a fever that turned out to be pneumonia, wrapped broken ribs. None of them ever asked her name. She never asked theirs. Massimo appeared irregularly, sometimes daily, sometimes not for a week. When he did come, he always checked on Gabriel first, would stand in the nursery doorway watching the baby sleep with an expression Selena couldn't read. "You're good with him," she said one evening, finding Massimo sitting in the rocking chair with Gabriel dozing against his chest. "I told you I had a nephew." "What happened to him?" Massimo's eyes went cold. "He died because I wasn't careful enough, because I thought the rules didn't apply to family." He transferred Gabriel to her arms carefully. They always apply, especially to family. He left before she could ask what that meant, but the pieces started coming together anyway. The way Antonio watched the hallways, the rotation of guards that never left the estate perimeter exposed, the fact that deliveries came through a security checkpoint and were searched before entering the house. This wasn't just wealth. This was fortress-level protection. Someone was hunting Massimo De Luca, and Selena was living inside the target zone. She realized how bad it was the night 3 men came through carrying someone on a stretcher. Unconscious, barely breathing, blood everywhere. What happened? Selena was already moving, pulling on gloves, checking vitals. "Ambush." Antonio's voice was tight. "Car bomb." Marco took the worst of it. Marco, the driver who'd brought her here that first morning. Selena worked frantically, intubating him, getting an IV line established, assessing the damage. Burns, shrapnel wounds, internal bleeding she couldn't fix without a real surgical suite. "He needs a hospital." "No hospitals." Massimo appeared in the doorway, his face carved from stone. "Do what you can." "I can't do surgery here. He needs—" "I know what he needs." Massimo's voice cracked like a whip. "And I know what happens if we take him to a hospital. The police, questions. Marco has warrants. He goes into custody. He's dead within 24 hours. At least here he has a chance." Their eyes met across Marco's dying body. "Please," Massimo said. The words sounded foreign in his mouth. Selina looked down at Marco. 28 years old, someone's son, maybe someone's brother, bleeding out because he'd driven a car Massimo was supposed to be in. She made a choice she'd regret later. "Get me more light. I need Antonio on suction. And someone find me O-negative blood, now." For 6 hours, Selina performed surgery. She wasn't qualified to do with equipment that wasn't adequate. She stopped the internal bleeding through sheer stubbornness, removed shrapnel piece by piece, kept Marco's heart beating when it wanted to stop. At dawn, she stepped back, covered in blood, shaking from exhaustion. Marco was alive. Barely, but alive. Massimo stood in the corner where he'd been for all 6 hours. His shirt was stained with Marco's blood from when he'd helped move him. His eyes were hollow. "He'll live." His voice was hoarse. "Maybe. If he doesn't go septic. If his organs don't fail. If—" Selina's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the floor. "I don't know." Massimo crossed the room, kneeling beside her. Up close, she could see the fear in his eyes. The guilt. The weight of command that meant every death was his responsibility. "Thank you." He said it quietly. Meant it, completely. Selina laughed. It came out bitter and broken. "Don't thank me yet. If he dies, that's on me too." "No." Massimo's hand covered hers, warm, solid. "If he dies, it's on whoever planted that bomb. Not you. Never you." The touch broke something inside her. Selina started crying, ugly, exhausted sobs she'd been holding back for months. For all the impossible choices and moral compromises. For living in a mansion while treating criminals. For feeding her son with blood money. For becoming exactly what she'd sworn she'd never be. Massimo didn't tell her to stop, didn't offer empty comfort. He just stayed there, his hand over hers, while she fell apart. When she finally stopped, Rosa appeared with Gabriel. The baby was crying, hungry, needing her. Selina pulled herself together because she had to, because motherhood didn't care about breakdowns or moral crises. She took Gabriel, let Rosa guide her back to her suite, and collapsed into the rocking chair to feed her son while trying not to think about the blood still under her fingernails. Marco survived. 3 days in the recovery room, fighting infections and complications, but he survived. By the end of the week, he was conscious and asking about the car bomb like he was discussing weather. "Who did it?" Selina asked Antonio one afternoon. They were in the medical suite, restocking supplies. Antonio's expression went carefully blank. "You don't want to know. I'm living here, treating the casualties. I think I have a right to know who's trying to kill everyone." "Roman Volkov." Antonio said the name like a curse. "Russian, runs operations north of the city. He and Mr. DeLuca have been at war for 3 years. It escalates. It calms down. It escalates again. This," he gestured toward where Marco was recovering, "this is escalation." "Why?" "Territory, money, pride. Take your pick." Antonio closed the supply cabinet. "Volkov lost a shipment 6 months ago. Major loss. Cost him millions and made him look weak. He blames Mr. DeLuca." "Did he do it?" Antonio's smile was cold. "What do you think?" Selina thought about the man who'd soothed her son to sleep, who'd stood for 6 hours watching her fight to save Marco's life, who'd thanked her while looking broken. "I think Massimo DeLuca is more complicated than he wants people to believe. That complication is what keeps him alive." Antonio headed for the door. "You should remember that, before you start thinking he's something he's not." The warning hung in the air long after Antonio left. But it was already too late, because Selina had started noticing things. The way Massimo checked on Gabriel every evening before bed. How he'd have Rosa bring dinner to Selina's suite when she worked late. The fact that the estate's library was being stocked with medical journals she'd mentioned wanting to read. Small things, thoughtful things, things that didn't fit the monster reputation. She knew better than to read into it, knew that kindness from dangerous men was still dangerous, but exhaustion and isolation wore down defenses. And Gabriel had started smiling when Massimo appeared, genuine, gummy-mouthed baby smiles that lit up his entire face. Even babies, apparently, were terrible judges of character. 2 months into living at the estate, Selina made a mistake. She'd just finished treating a dislocated jaw, some dispute in one of Massimo's clubs that had gotten physical, and was cleaning up the medical suite when Massimo appeared in the doorway. "You're still awake?" Not a question. "Gabriel's sleeping through the night now. I'm not used to having time to myself." Selina organized instruments into the autoclave. "Feels wrong somehow." Massimo moved into the room. He changed from his usual suit into jeans and a dark sweater that made him look younger. Almost normal. "Rosa says he's hitting all his milestones early. He rolled over last week, front to back." Selina smiled despite herself. "I cried like an idiot." "That's not idiotic." Massimo leaned against the counter. "That's being a mother." The comfortable silence that followed felt dangerous, like standing too close to the edge of something. "Can I ask you something?" Selina turned to face him. "The nephew you mentioned, what was his name?" Massimo's expression closed off immediately. "That's not a conversation we're having." "Why not?" "Because some doors stay locked." His voice was flat, final. But Selina was too tired to read social cues properly. "You know everything about me, about Gabriel, about how we ended up here, but I know nothing about you except your reputation." "My reputation is enough." "Is it?" Selina took a step closer. "Because the man I've seen these past 2 months, he doesn't match the stories." "Then you're not paying attention?" Massimo pushed off the counter. "I'm exactly what they say. The only difference is you're seeing the domestic version, the parts I keep hidden from business." "Why?" "Why what?" "Why keep it hidden? Why pretend to be something you're not?" Massimo's eyes flashed. "You think this is pretend? You think kindness makes me less dangerous?" He moved closer, closing the distance between them. "I've killed men for less than what you're implying. The only reason you're safe is because you saved my life. Don't mistake debt for virtue." His face was inches from hers, close enough that Selina could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could smell his cologne, could feel the heat radiating off him. "You're trying to scare me," she said quietly. "I'm trying to be honest." "Are you?" Selina held his gaze. "Because I think you're trying to convince yourself as much as me." For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. The air between them felt charged, dangerous, like touching a live wire. Then Massimo stepped back. "Get some sleep, Selina. You're exhausted and saying things you'll regret." He left before she could respond. Selina stood alone in the medical suite, her heart pounding, wondering what the hell she'd just done. The dynamic shifted after that night. Massimo stopped coming to the nursery, stopped asking about Gabriel. When Selina had questions about patients or supplies, Antonio delivered the answers. The careful distance Massimo had maintained in the beginning was back, reinforced, absolute. Selina told herself it was better this way, safer. She was an employee, nothing more. Getting confused about that was how people got hurt. But Gabriel noticed. He'd started looking for Massimo in the evenings, his little face scrunching up in confusion when the visit stopped. By the end of the week, he was fussy at bedtime, refusing to settle. "He misses Mr. DeLuca," Rosa said, rocking Gabriel while he cried. "Babies, they know routine. They feel changes." "Then Mr. DeLuca shouldn't have started a routine he couldn't maintain," Selina snapped. Rosa gave her a look that said she understood exactly what was happening. "Men like Mr. DeLuca, they protect themselves, push away before they can be hurt. You were getting too close." He noticed. "There's nothing to get close to. I work for him, that's all." "If you say so," Rosa transferred the still fussing Gabriel to Selina. "But the baby, he is honest. He wants what he wants. Maybe you should try honesty too." Selina spent that night walking Gabriel through the suite, bouncing and shushing while her mind spun in circles. She didn't have feelings for Massimo DeLuca. That would be insane. He was a criminal, a killer, a man whose world she'd stumbled into by accident and stayed in by necessity. Except none of that was entirely true anymore, was it? She'd stayed because of Gabriel, because the money and security gave her son a better life than she could provide alone. But somewhere in the past 2 months, it had become more than that. The estate felt like home. Rosa felt like family. The work felt meaningful in a way the refugee center never quite had. And Massimo, no, she wasn't going there. Gabriel finally fell asleep around midnight, exhausted from crying. Selina laid him in his crib and stood watching him breathe, wondering how everything had gotten so complicated. The knock came softly, tentative. Selina opened the suite door to find Massimo standing there in the hallway. He looked exhausted, uncertain, nothing like the controlled predator she'd grown used to. "I heard him crying," he said. "Is he okay?" "He's fine, just fussy." Massimo nodded, started to turn away, then stopped. "I'm sorry for disappearing. That wasn't fair to him. Or to me." The words came out before Selina could stop them. Massimo turned back slowly, his expression unreadable. "You said I was getting too close," Selina continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "What did you mean?" "Exactly what it sounded like." "Why is that a problem?" "Because people close to me die, Selina." The rawness in his voice made her breath catch. "My parents, my sister, my nephew, everyone I've ever cared about has been used against me, so I stopped caring. It's safer that way. That's not living. That's just surviving. It's all I know how to do." Massimo's hands clenched at his sides. "And you and Gabriel, you're making me forget that. Making me want things I gave up on years ago. That's dangerous. For everyone." Selina took a step into the hallway, then another, until she was close enough to see the war happening behind his eyes. "What do you want?" she asked. "Things I have no right to want. Try me." The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Then Massimo moved, closing the distance, his hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. "This," he said, "you, Gabriel, a life that isn't soaked in blood, all the things I stopped believing were possible." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Selina's breath caught. Every rational part of her brain was screaming to step back, to maintain boundaries, to remember who and what he was. But God, she was tired of being rational, tired of being alone, tired of carrying everything by herself. She leaned into his touch instead. Massimo's eyes darkened. His other hand came up, framing her face, tilting it up toward his. "Tell me to stop." "I can't." "Selina, I should. I know I should, but I can't." He kissed her then, soft at first, questioning. When she didn't pull away, it deepened into something desperate and hungry, like two drowning people finding air. Selina's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Massimo backed her against the doorframe with a gentleness that didn't match the intensity building between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Massimo rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake," he said. "Probably. People will use it against us." "I know. You should walk away, right now. Take Gabriel and leave before this gets worse." Selina looked up at him, at the man who'd given her safety when she had nothing, who'd held her son while she fell apart, who was currently looking at her like she was the only solid thing in a world designed to destroy him. "I'm not walking away," she said. "Not anymore." Something shifted in Massimo's expression. Relief, fear, resignation. All of it at once. He kissed her again, slower this time, and Selina let herself fall into it, into the impossibility of caring for a man she should hate, into the fantasy that maybe, somehow, this could work. She should have known better, because 3 days later, everything exploded. It started with a woman. Selina was in the medical suite, restocking supplies, when she heard heels clicking on marble. Sharp, deliberate, the kind of sound that announced someone used to being noticed. She turned to find a woman standing in the doorway. Late 30s, stunning in the way that came from expensive maintenance, perfect hair, perfect makeup, designer clothes that probably cost more than Selina's entire wardrobe, and eyes that assessed Selina like a competing predator evaluating territory. "So you're the nurse." The woman's voice was cultured, cold. "I've heard so much about you. Can I help you?" Selina kept her tone professional despite the immediate dislike crawling up her spine. "I'm Viviana Moretti. I'm sure Massimo has mentioned me." He hadn't. Not once. Selina's expression must have shown it because Viviana's smile sharpened into something cruel. How interesting. He always was good at compartmentalizing. Viviana moved into the room, examining the equipment with casual disdain. "We were engaged. Did he tell you that? 3 years of planning a wedding before he decided sentiment was a luxury he couldn't afford." The words landed like stones in Selina's stomach. That's between you and him. Oh, sweetie, Viviana's laugh was vicious. There is no you and him. There's Massimo and his empire. Everything else is just temporary comfort. You'll learn that, probably the hard way. If you're done, I'm not. Viviana leaned against the exam table. I came to give you advice, woman to woman. Whatever you think is happening between you and Massimo, it's not real. He collects broken things, fixes them, then moves on when they're no longer interesting. You're just the latest project. Get out! Selina's voice came out steady despite the rage building in her chest. Or what? You'll tell Massimo I was mean to you? Viviana's eyes glittered. He won't care. He never does. Not really. That's what makes him so effective. He can turn emotions on and off like a light switch. She left then, heels clicking away down the hallway, leaving Selina standing alone with poison spreading through her thoughts. Rational Selina knew it was manipulation. Knew Viviana was working an angle, but exhausted, overwhelmed, still adjusting to everything, Selina couldn't quite shut off the voice asking, what if she's right? She found Massimo in his office 2 hours later. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening immediately. Hey, I was just about to... Who's Viviana Moretti? Massimo went still. Where did you hear that name? From her. She came to the medical suite, said you were engaged. We were. Past tense. It ended badly. Massimo stood, moving around the desk. What did she say to you? That I'm a project, that you collect broken things and move on when you're bored. Selina crossed her arms. Is that true? No? Then what am I? The question hung between them. Massimo's jaw tightened. This is complicated, Selina. Complicated how? Either I matter or I don't. Either this, she gestured between them, is real or it's not. Which is it? It's real. Massimo closed the distance, his hands settling on her shoulders. But it's also dangerous. Viviana showing up here proves that. Someone sent her. Someone who knows targeting you is the fastest way to get to me. Then protect me. I am. By keeping distance, by not making you a visible target. His grip tightened. This thing between us? It can't be public. Not yet. Not until I've handled the threats. And when will that be? A month? A year? Never? I don't know. The honesty hurt worse than a lie would have. Selina pulled away from his touch. So what do we do? Pretend? Sneak around like we're doing something wrong? For now, yes. Massimo's expression was carved from stone. I know it's not fair. Fair? Selina laughed bitterly. None of this is fair. I'm living in your house, raising my son in your world, treating your wounded, and apparently being evaluated by your ex-fiancé. And now you're telling me I can't even acknowledge that there's something happening between us? To keep you safe. I'm tired of safe. The words exploded out of her. I've been playing it safe my whole life, being careful, being smart. And where did it get me? Alone. Broke. Desperate enough to accept help from a man whose world terrifies me. Maybe I'm done being safe. Massimo's eyes flashed. You have Gabriel to think about. Don't. Selina's voice dropped to something dangerous. Don't you dare use my son to manipulate me. I think about Gabriel every second of every day. Everything I do is for him. Including this. Including what? Believing that maybe, possibly, there's something here worth fighting for. The silence that followed felt like the moment before an explosion. Massimo stared at her with an expression she couldn't read. Fury, fear, something deeper that looked almost like longing. Then he moved. 3 steps, and he had her backed against the wall, his hands on either side of her head, his face inches from hers. You want to fight for this? His voice was low, dangerous. Then understand what you're fighting for. I'm not a good man, Selina. I've done things that would make you sick. I've hurt people, killed people, built an empire on violence and fear. That's who I am. That's what you'd be choosing. I know. Do you? Really? His hand came up, fingers threading through her hair. Because once you're in, you're in. There's no going back, no changing your mind when it gets too hard. This world doesn't let people leave cleanly. Selina met his eyes without flinching. I'm already in. The moment I stitched you together on those docks, I was in. Everything after has just been figuring out how deep. Something cracked in Massimo's expression. The control he wore like armor splintered just enough for her to see the man underneath, desperate, damaged, wanting so badly to believe that something good could survive in his world. He kissed her like she was oxygen, like she was the only thing keeping him human. And Selena kissed him back with everything she'd been holding in, all the fear and loneliness and desperate need for connection. When they broke apart, both shaking, Massimo pressed his forehead to hers. "I can't promise you safe," he whispered, "or easy, or any kind of normal future. I don't care." "You should." "Well, I don't." Selena pulled back enough to look at him. "So what now?" "Now we're careful. We're smart. We don't give Viviana or anyone else ammunition to use against us." His thumb traced her jawline. "And when the time is right, when it's safe, we figure out what this actually is." It wasn't the declaration Selena wanted, but it was honest. And from a man who dealt in violence and lies, honesty felt like the most valuable thing he could offer. "Okay," she said. "We're careful." Massimo kissed her once more, then stepped back, his mask sliding into place. "Antonio will increase security around your suite. No one gets near you or Gabriel without clearance. Is that necessary? After Viviana's visit?" "Yes." His expression hardened. "She wouldn't have come here without permission. Someone's testing our defenses, finding weaknesses." "Volkov? Maybe. Or someone else. I have a lot of enemies." Massimo moved to his desk, already shifting into command mode. "Stay in the estate for the next few days. No errands, no unnecessary risks." "I'm not a prisoner." "No. You're something much more valuable." He looked at her with eyes that had gone cold again. "You're a liability I can't afford to lose." The words stung, even though Selena understood the practical reality behind them. She left his office without another word, navigating back through the mansion to her suite where Gabriel was waking up from his nap. Rosa met her in the nursery, concern etched across her face. "You look pale. What happened?" "Apparently I'm a target now." "You were always a target. Living here makes it official." Rosa handed Gabriel over. "But Mr. DeLuca, he will protect you. He protects what's his." "I'm not his." Rosa's look said she knew better. The next week passed in tense normalcy. Selena treated patients, cared for Gabriel, avoided thinking too hard about the guards who now followed her everywhere. Massimo appeared at night, after Gabriel was asleep, and they'd talk in quiet voices about nothing important while dancing around everything that mattered. It felt stolen, fragile, like something that would shatter if they looked at it too directly. Then the bomb dropped. Metaphorically this time. Antonio found Selena in the medical suite on a Thursday afternoon. His expression was grim. "We have a problem." Selena's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "Viviana's spreading rumors, says you're a spy, working for Volkov, that you seduced Mr. DeLuca to get access to his operations." The words hit like physical blows. "That's insane. I barely know who Volkov is." "Doesn't matter. She has documentation. Bank transfers in your name. Phone records, text messages." Antonio's jaw tightened. All fake, obviously, but convincing enough to create doubt. "Massimo knows it's fake, right?" The pause before Antonio answered told her everything. "He's reviewing the evidence now. He has to. People are watching. If he dismisses it without investigation, he looks weak, compromised. So I'm guilty until proven innocent. In this world?" "Yes." Antonio's eyes held something like pity. "Perception is reality, and right now the perception is that you're a threat." Selena's hands shook. "What happens if he can't prove it's fake?" Antonio didn't answer, didn't need to. She found Massimo in his office an hour later, surrounded by papers and computer screens. He looked up when she entered, and the distance in his eyes made her blood run cold. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Antonio told me about Viviana's accusations. They're being investigated." "By who? You?" Selena moved closer, despite every instinct screaming to run. "You actually think I could be working for Volkov?" "I think I'd be an idiot to dismiss the possibility without evidence." Massimo's voice was flat, professional. Nothing like the man who'd kissed her against the wall. "Bank transfers don't fabricate themselves, Selena." "Then someone fabricated them to set me up. You can't actually believe—" "What I believe doesn't matter." He stood, hands braced on the desk. What I can prove matters. What my organization believes matters. And right now, the evidence suggests you've been compromised. So that's it? Weeks of whatever this was, and you just believe some doctored documents over me. I believe in staying alive, which means trusting evidence over emotion. His eyes were cold now, empty. Until I can verify your innocence, you're confined to your suite. Antonio will post guards for your protection and ours. The betrayal burned through her chest like acid. You're putting me under house arrest. I'm keeping you safe while I sort this out. You're choosing your empire over me. There is no choice. Massimo's voice rose for the first time. There's only survival, and I won't risk hundreds of lives because I'm too blinded by what I feel for you to see the truth. What you feel for me? Selena laughed bitterly. You don't feel anything. Viviana was right. You collect broken things and discard them when they become inconvenient. I was just too stupid to see it. Selena, No. She backed toward the door. You want evidence? Fine. Investigate. But when you figure out I'm telling the truth, don't expect forgiveness. Don't expect understanding. Because this, choosing to believe I could betray you, that's the real betrayal. She left before he could respond, practically running through the hallways back to her suite. Rosa was waiting, having clearly heard something was wrong. She took one look at Selena's face and pulled her into a fierce hug. He's sending me away, Selena choked out, or locking me up. I don't even know which. He's protecting you. Rosa held tighter. From himself, if necessary. By accusing me of being a spy? By doing what he has to do to maintain control. You don't understand this world yet. He can't show weakness. Can't show that you matter more than the organization. If he does, they'll use it to destroy both of you. Then this world is broken. Yes, Rosa agreed quietly. But it's the only world we have. 2 guards appeared in the hallway outside Selena's suite that evening. Antonio delivered the official order. She was confined to her rooms until further notice. All meals would be brought to her. Medical duties suspended. 0 contact with anyone except Rosa and Gabriel. Imprisonment with a prettier name, prettier. Selena spent that night pacing while Gabriel slept, her mind racing through impossible scenarios. She could run. Take Gabriel and disappear before Massimo decided she was too much of a liability to keep alive. But where would she go with no money, no resources, and a baby? She could fight, demand to see the evidence, prove it was fake. But how? She had no expertise in forensics or digital trails. She was a trauma nurse, not an investigator. Or she could wait, trust that Massimo would find the truth, trust the man who'd just chosen protocol over her. None of the options felt survivable. The knock came at midnight, soft but insistent. Selena opened the door to find Massimo standing there. He looked destroyed, hair disheveled, shirt untucked, eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept in days. I shouldn't be here, he said. Then why are you? Because He stopped, started again. Because I need you to know this isn't what I want, but it's what you're choosing. It's what I have to choose. Massimo's hands clenched at his sides. If I protect you over the organization, they'll turn on me, on you, on Gabriel. This is the only way to keep you safe while I investigate. You're investigating whether I'm a traitor. How is that keeping me safe? Because once I prove you're innocent, and I will, no one can question it. No one can use doubt as a weapon against us. He took a step closer. But until then, I need you to trust me. That's asking a lot after today. I know. His voice cracked. I'm asking anyway. Selena wanted to slam the door in his face, wanted to make him hurt the way she was hurting. But the exhaustion in his eyes, the desperation, it was real. Whatever mask he wore for everyone else, right now, with her, it was gone. How long? She asked. A week? Maybe 2. And if you can't prove I'm innocent, Massimo's silence answered for him. I won't let it come to that, he said finally. I promise. Your promises don't mean much right now. I know. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, but not quite touching. But they're all I have to offer. Selena stepped back, breaking the almost contact. Then you should go, before your guards report that you're fraternizing with the enemy. The words hit their mark. Massimo flinched, nodded once, and turned away. He made it 3 steps before stopping. For what it's worth, he said without turning around, I do feel something. More than I've felt in years. That's why this is so hard. Then he was gone, and Selena was alone again, with her sleeping son, and the ruins of something that might have been love under different circumstances. She didn't sleep that night, didn't cry, just sat in the rocking chair holding Gabriel and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so fast. By dawn, she'd made a decision. If Massimo wouldn't trust her, she'd prove her innocence herself. Somehow. Even if it meant breaking every rule he'd just imposed. Because she wasn't going down for a crime she didn't commit, and she sure as hell wasn't letting Viviana Moretti win. The investigation took 3 days to fall apart. Selena spent 72 hours locked in her suite like a prisoner, watching Rosa come and go with meals and sympathy, while Gabriel remained blissfully unaware that his mother was being accused of espionage. The guards outside her door changed shifts with military precision. Morning, afternoon, night. She memorized their faces, their patterns, the exact moment when they'd look away to check their phones or speak into their radios. She was mapping escape routes she prayed she'd never need to use. On the 4th morning, Antonio appeared at her door instead of Rosa. His expression was carved from granite. Get dressed. Mr. DeLuca wants to see you. Selena's heart hammered against her ribs. Did he find something? Just get dressed. She changed quickly, hands shaking as she pulled on jeans and a sweater. Rosa arrived to take Gabriel, her eyes full of worry she didn't voice. Selena kissed her son's forehead, breathing in his baby smell like it might be the last time, then followed Antonio through hallways that felt colder than they had 4 days ago. They didn't go to Massimo's office. Instead, Antonio led her down to a level of the estate she'd never seen, basement converted into something that looked like a war room. Computer screens, maps on walls, a conference table surrounded by men in suits who all stopped talking when she entered. Massimo stood at the head of the table. He looked like he hadn't slept since she'd seen him last. Dark circles, clenched jaw, the kind of exhaustion that came from carrying impossible weight. Sit. He gestured to a chair. Selena remained standing. What did you find? Sit down, Selena. The edge in his voice made her comply. She sank into the chair while every man in the room watched her like she was a bomb that might detonate. Massimo placed a folder on the table in front of her. Open it. Inside were bank statements, her name, her social security number, deposits totaling $200,000 over the past 6 months from offshore accounts traced back to shell corporations linked to Roman Volkov's operations. The numbers blurred. Selena's breath came short and fast. That's not real. I've never even heard of these accounts. There's more. Massimo's voice was flat, cold. He placed another document down. Phone records showing texts between her number and an unknown contact, coded messages about deliveries and schedules and locations. Then photos, surveillance images of her at the refugee center, time-stamped and annotated with notes about Massimo's movements. This is fake, Selena's voice cracked. All of it. Someone planted this. The bank confirmed the accounts exist. In your name. With your information. Massimo leaned against the table. The phone records match your device. The text came from your phone. Then someone cloned it, hacked it. I don't know how this works, but I know I didn't do this. Convince me. 2 words. A challenge and a plea wrapped together. Selena looked around the room at faces that had already convicted her. Antonio standing near the door, hand resting on his weapon. 3 other men she recognized from the estate, all watching with predatory stillness. And Massimo, holding himself together through sheer force of will. I saved your life, she said quietly. On the docks, I could have walked away. Could have let you bleed out. Why would I do that if I was working for Volkov? To gain access. One of the other men spoke up, older, with a Russian accent. Save the boss, earn trust, get inside. Classic long game. Then why take the money you offered? Why move here? Why? Selena's voice broke. Why fall for you if this was all calculated? The room went silent. Every man looked at Massimo, waiting to see how he'd respond to what she'd just admitted in front of his entire command structure. His expression didn't change. Emotion is the best cover, makes the lie believable. The words hit like a knife between her ribs. Selena laughed, broken and bitter. You actually believe that? You think I'm that good of an actress? I think you're smart enough to play the part. Massimo straightened. I think Volkov saw an opportunity when you saved my life and exploited it. Whether you knew you were being manipulated or not. I'm not being manipulated. I'm being framed. Selena slammed her hands on the table. By someone who benefits from you doubting me. Someone who wants me gone. And you're too paranoid to see it. Paranoia keeps me alive. And it's about to kill me. She stood up, chair scraping back. You want proof? Fine. Let me see the evidence myself. Let me trace these accounts. Because whoever set this up made a mistake somewhere. They always do. You're a nurse, not an investigator. Then what do you suggest? I just accept this? Let you decide I'm guilty and... She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't voice what came next. Massimo's jaw tightened. He looked at Antonio, some silent communication passing between them, then back to Selena. You have 24 hours, under supervision. If you can find proof this was fabricated, I'll investigate further. If you can't, he stopped. 24 hours. That's all I can give you without looking compromised. It wasn't enough time. They both knew it, but it was more than she'd expected. I'll need access to your IT systems, financial records, phone logs. Selena's mind was already racing. And I'll need someone who actually knows how to trace digital evidence. Marco. Massimo nodded to Antonio. Get him down here. He's cleared for this. Marco. The driver she'd saved after the car bomb. He appeared 20 minutes later, still moving carefully from his injuries but sharp-eyed and focused when Antonio explained what was needed. You think you were set up? Marco asked Selena directly. I know I was. Then let's find the bastard who did it. He cracked his knuckles. I used to do cybercrimes before I started driving. If there's a trail, I'll find it. They worked through the day in the basement war room, Marco hammering away at keyboards while Selena studied every document with the methodical focus she'd learned in trauma bays, looking for the detail that didn't fit, the inconsistency that revealed the lie. The bank accounts were sophisticated, offshore, layered through multiple jurisdictions, but they'd been opened 6 months ago, before she'd even saved Massimo's life, which meant someone had been planning this for a long time, or someone had backdated them to make it look that way. Here, Marco pointed at the screen. The phone records. They show texts from your device, but look at the cell tower pings. Half these messages were sent when your phone was connecting to towers near the estate. The other half connect to towers downtown. I'm always at the estate now, Selena said. I haven't been downtown in months. Exactly. Marco's fingers flew across the keyboard. Someone cloned your phone, probably when you were at the refugee center. They've been sending messages from a duplicate device. It was proof. Not conclusive, but enough to create reasonable doubt. Selena felt something loosen in her chest, the first breath of hope in 4 days. Then the door opened and Viviana Moretti walked in like she owned the place. She wore white, elegant and pristine. Her smile was a weapon. Oh, good. You're all here. She glanced around the room with satisfaction. Saves me from having to repeat myself. Massimo straightened. What are you doing here, Viviana? Bringing you a gift. She set a tablet on the table. More evidence. Fresh from Volkov's organization. Seems he's bragging about his little spy. Has recordings of phone calls. Her voice, his instructions, all very damning. Selena's blood turned to ice. That's impossible. Is it? Viviana tapped the screen. Audio filled the room. A woman's voice, similar to Selena's but slightly off, like hearing yourself on a recording, discussing locations, schedules, vulnerabilities, and Massimo's security. This is fake, Selena said immediately. That's not me. Voice analysis says otherwise. Viviana's smile widened. 92% match, more than enough to be admissible as evidence. Evidence for what? Massimo's voice was dangerous. There's no court here. No, but there is justice. Viviana looked directly at Selena. She's a liability. Everyone in your organization knows it. The question is whether you're strong enough to do what needs to be done, or if you've become too weak to protect what you built. The threat wasn't subtle. Viviana was forcing Massimo's hand in front of his men. Prove he wasn't compromised by dealing with Selena, or prove he was by protecting her. Either way, she won. Get out. Massimo's voice was quiet, lethal. I'm trying to help you. You're trying to manipulate me. It won't work. He moved toward her with predatory grace. I don't know what game you're playing, Viviana, but you're going to stop. Now. The only game being played is the one where your little nurse destroys everything you've built. Viviana held her ground. But fine. Ignore the evidence. Ignore the warnings. Just don't come crying to me when Volkov uses her to put a bullet in your head. She left, heels clicking on concrete, leaving her poisonous tablet behind. The room erupted. 3 men talking at once about protocol and security and the need for decisive action. Antonio trying to maintain order. Marco still staring at his screens like the answer might appear if he looked hard enough. And Massimo standing perfectly still in the center of chaos, staring at Selena with an expression she couldn't read. Everyone out, he said, except Selena. The room cleared in seconds. Even Antonio hesitated but ultimately obeyed. The door closed with a heavy thud, leaving them alone in the humming silence of computer equipment. I didn't make those calls, Selena said. I don't care what the audio analysis says. That's not my voice. I know. The words stopped her cold. What? The voice is close, but not perfect. Marco heard it too. Someone used synthesis software to fake it. Massimo's hands curled into fists. But proving that takes time we don't have. Viviana forced my hand. If I don't act, my own men will start questioning whether I'm compromised. So you have to choose. Selena's throat tightened. Your empire or me? There's no choice. There never was. Massimo closed the distance between them. I choose my empire. Because if I don't, everyone dies, including you and Gabriel. Then why are we having this conversation? Because I need you to understand something. His hand came up, cupping her face with heartbreaking gentleness. When I do what I'm about to do, it's not because I don't trust you. It's because I'm out of options. Selena's heart dropped. What are you going to do? What I have to. He kissed her then, desperate and final, like a goodbye. When he pulled back, his eyes were empty again, the mask firmly in place. Antonio! The door opened immediately. Massimo's second-in-command had obviously been waiting. Take her to the holding room. No visitors. No contact. Massimo... Selena tried to pull away, but Antonio's grip was iron. I'm sorry. Massimo wouldn't look at her. I'm so goddamn sorry. Antonio dragged her out of the war room, through hallways she didn't recognize, down another level into basement areas that smelled like concrete and fear. He opened a heavy door and pushed her inside. The room was small. Concrete walls. 1 cot. A single light fixture. No windows. A cell. I'll bring food, Antonio said quietly. And I'll check on Gabriel. Rosa won't let anything happen to him. How long? Selena's voice shook. I don't know, until Mr. DeLuca figures out what to do with you. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, I don't think you're a spy, but it doesn't matter what I think. The door closed, locked. Selena was alone in the dark with nothing but her thoughts and rising panic. She'd gambled on Massimo believing her, on trust meaning something, on whatever they'd built together being strong enough to survive doubt. She'd been wrong. Time lost meaning in the cell. Without windows, Selena couldn't tell if hours or days passed. Antonio brought food twice, plain sandwiches and water. Asked if she needed anything. She asked for Gabriel. He said the baby was fine, Rosa was taking care of him, and that was all he could tell her. By the 3rd meal delivery, Selena had worn a path in the concrete from pacing. Her mind wouldn't stop spinning scenarios. Massimo deciding she was too dangerous to keep alive. Viviana engineering an accident. Gabriel growing up without her. Or worse, Gabriel growing up in Massimo's world, learning to be just like him. The 4th time the door opened, it wasn't Antonio. Marco slipped inside, moving fast, closing the door behind him without locking it. He put a finger to his lips, then pulled a small device from his pocket and placed it against the door. Jammer, he whispered, bought us 5 minutes before security notices. What are you doing? Getting you out. Marco grabbed her arm. I found something. Proof Viviana fabricated everything. but she's got people inside the organization. If I bring it to Mr. DeLuca through normal channels, it'll disappear. We need to run. Selena's heart pounded. I can't leave Gabriel. Rosa's meeting us at the East Service entrance with the baby. I called in a favor, but we have to move now. Every instinct screamed trap, but staying in this cell meant death or worse. And if Marco had found proof, how do I know you're not working with Viviana? You don't. You're going to have to trust me. Marco's eyes were steady, honest. I owe you my life. I'm paying that debt. Now move. Selena moved. They slipped through corridors Marco knew by heart, avoiding cameras he'd already disabled, timing their movements between guard rotations. Up 2 flights of stairs, through a kitchen that smelled like bread and tomato sauce, past storage rooms and laundry facilities. Then they were at a service door and Rosa was there with Gabriel bundled in a blanket, a bag slung over her shoulder. Quickly! Rosa shoved the bag at Selena. Diapers, formula, your documents, money, everything I could grab. Rosa, you shouldn't be helping me. Mr. DeLuca is making a mistake. I've seen how he looks at you, how he is with the baby. He loves you both, but his fear is bigger than his love right now. Rosa pressed a phone into her hand. This is clean, untraceable. When you're safe, call me. I'll tell you when it's safe to come back. If it's ever safe, Marco said grimly, we need to go. Selena took Gabriel, held him close, and followed Marco into the night. They made it 3 blocks before everything went wrong. The SUV came out of nowhere, blocking the street. Men poured out, not Massimo's. Wrong suits, wrong energy. Viviana stepped out of the back seat like a queen surveying conquered territory. Really, Marco? I expected better, she tisked. Did you think I wouldn't notice you accessing sealed files? Moving money around? I've been tracking you for days. Marco shoved Selena behind him. Run. Where? Men were approaching from both sides now, 6 of them, armed. Just run. But there was nowhere to go. They were surrounded in seconds. One of the men ripped Gabriel from Selena's arms. She screamed, lunged for him, but someone caught her from behind. Pain exploded across her skull as they slammed her to the pavement. Don't hurt the baby, Viviana said casually. He's leverage. The nurse, I don't care. Marco's the real problem here. The gunshot was deafening. Marco crumpled, blood spreading across his shirt. Selena screamed again, trying to crawl toward him, but hands held her down. Gabriel was crying, terrified, confused baby wails that tore Selena's heart apart. Load them up, Viviana ordered. Mr. Volkov wants to meet the woman who's caused so much trouble. They dragged Selena into the SUV. Someone shoved Gabriel back into her arms, probably to keep him quiet. She held her son against her chest, her whole body shaking, while blood from the cut on her head dripped down her face. Marco lay in the street, not moving. The SUV pulled away, tires squealing. Selena watched through the back window as his body got smaller and smaller until she couldn't see it anymore. Comfortable? Viviana sat across from her, perfectly composed. It's about an hour to Volkov's warehouse. I'd suggest you use the time to get your story straight. He's going to want to know everything about DeLuca's operations, security, weaknesses, where he sleeps, who he trusts. I'll tell him nothing. Oh, sweetie. Everyone talks eventually. Viviana's smile was vicious, especially when their children are watching. The threat landed like a physical blow. Selena held Gabriel tighter, his warm weight the only thing keeping her from complete breakdown. She'd been so stupid, trusted the wrong people, made the wrong choices, and now her son was going to pay for her mistakes. The warehouse district looked abandoned, exactly the kind of place where people disappeared permanently. The SUV pulled into a loading bay. More men, more guns. They hauled Selena out while someone else took Gabriel. No, please. He needs me. He'll be fine. Quiet and good. Viviana gestured, and a woman appeared, older, grandmother type. She took Gabriel with surprising gentleness. See? We're not monsters. The baby will be fed and changed. You, however, have an appointment. They dragged Selena deeper into the warehouse, past crates and machinery, past rooms that smelled like blood and chemicals. Finally into an office that looked absurdly normal. Desk, chairs, filing cabinets. Roman Volkov sat behind the desk like he was conducting a business meeting. Late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit. He could have been anyone's accountant, except for the eyes. Cold, dead. The eyes of someone who'd done terrible things so many times they no longer registered as terrible. Selina Velez, he gestured to a chair. Sit, please. Selina remained standing, blood still dripped from her head wound. Her hands shook. But she wouldn't sit for this man. Volkov smiled. Brave, or stupid. With women, it's often hard to tell the difference. He pulled out a folder. I've been watching you for months, ever since you saved DeLuca's life on those docks. That was very inconvenient for me. I'd paid good money for that assassination. Sorry to disappoint. Oh, you haven't disappointed. You've exceeded expectations. He flipped through papers. A trauma nurse. Smart, capable, desperate enough to be manipulated. Perfect candidate for insertion into DeLuca's inner circle. All we had to do was wait for you to need help, and eventually, he smiled. Everyone needs help. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. The hospital bills, the money Massimo gave me, that was you. You made sure I'd be desperate enough to take it. The preeclampsia was natural, but yes, we made sure the bills were maximized. Made sure your insurance denied claims. Made sure you had nowhere else to turn. Volkov leaned back. Then we waited. Knew DeLuca would bring you into his home eventually. He has a weakness for broken things. I'm not broken. Everyone's broken, Miss Velez. It's just a question of where the cracks are. He closed the folder. Now, you're going to tell me everything you learned while living in DeLuca's estate. Guard rotations, safe rooms, weapons caches, his routines, who visits, when, how often. No. I'm not giving you a choice. Then kill me, because I won't help you destroy him. Volkov's expression didn't change. He pressed a button on his desk. A screen flickered to life on the wall. Security camera footage. Gabriel, in a room with the grandmother woman. Safe. For now. I won't hurt your son, Volkov said calmly, but I will let him grow up without a mother. Orphanages are terrible places. Children get lost in the system, abused, forgotten. Is that what you want for Gabriel? Selina's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. DeLuca has something I want. You're going to help me take it. Then you and your son can disappear. New identities, money, freedom. All you have to do is cooperate. And if I don't? Then I sell you both to people who specialize in making examples. Volkov's smile never reached his eyes. There are markets for women like you, for children like him, the kind of markets that don't ask questions. The horror of it crashed over her. Human trafficking, a fate worse than death, for her and for Gabriel. I need time, Selina heard herself say, to think. You have 10 minutes, then I need answers, or I make a phone call. Volkov stood. Use them wisely. He left her alone in the office. The door locked from the outside. The security feed still showed Gabriel, now sleeping in a crib, unaware that his mother was being forced to choose between betraying the man she loved and condemning her son to hell. Selina sank into the chair, her legs finally giving out. Her head throbbed. Her hands shook. Every part of her body was screaming for escape that didn't exist. She'd been so wrong about everything. Viviana hadn't been trying to drive her away from Massimo. She'd been driving her directly into Volkov's trap. Every accusation, every piece of fake evidence, all designed to isolate her, make her vulnerable, force her to run. And it had worked perfectly. Now she was here, and Massimo thought she was a traitor locked in his basement, and Gabriel was being used as leverage, and Marco was dead in the street, and there was no way out that didn't end in catastrophe. Unless... Selina's mind raced through possibilities with the same desperate focus she used in trauma bays when patients were coding. There had to be an angle, a play, something Volkov wasn't expecting. She thought about the phone Rosa had given her. Probably still in her pocket if they hadn't searched her yet. They'd been too focused on getting Gabriel away from her to do a thorough pat-down. She checked. The phone was still there. Small miracle. But who could she call? Antonio? He'd think it was a trick. Any of Massimo's people would assume the same. She was already convicted in their minds. Massimo himself? And say what? That she'd been kidnapped? That Volkov wanted information? He'd think it was a ploy. Another manipulation. Unless she gave him something he couldn't ignore. Selena pulled up the camera on the phone, held it at arm's length, making sure her bloody face and terrified eyes were visible. Then she hit record. Massimo, it's Selena. I'm in Volkov's warehouse. I don't know where exactly. Viviana set me up. All of it. The evidence, the accusations, everything was designed to isolate me so Volkov could grab me. He has Gabriel. He's forcing me to give up information about your security, or he'll... Her voice cracked. She forced it steady. He'll sell us both, to traffickers. He gave me 10 minutes to decide. She paused, hands shaking so hard the camera wobbled. I won't betray you. No matter what happens. I need you to know that. I didn't do any of the things they accused me of. I never worked for Volkov. I never wanted to hurt you. I just... Tears finally came. She let them. I fell in love with you and I didn't know how to stop. And now Gabriel's going to pay for my stupidity, for believing things could be different, for thinking I could survive in your world. She wiped her eyes, smearing blood and tears together. You were right. I should have left when you told me to. Should have taken the money and run before I got attached, before I started believing in fairy tales. Now it's too late. And I'm sorry. For everything, for not being strong enough, for dragging you and Gabriel into this, for... The door opened. Volkov stepped back in, checking his watch. Time's up. Selena sent the video. Not to Massimo directly. That number was monitored. She sent it to Rosa's phone. Trusted the older woman to get it to him. Then she deleted it from her device and dropped the phone behind the chair cushion. Well? Volkov asked. Selena stood up. Met his dead eyes with something that felt like courage, but was probably just desperation wearing a different mask. Gabriel first. I need to see him. Hold him. Make sure he's okay. Then I'll tell you everything you want to know. It was a lie. She'd tell him nothing useful, would give him just enough truth mixed with fiction to keep him talking until what? Rescue? Escape? Miracle? She didn't know. Didn't matter. All that mattered was buying time and keeping Gabriel alive. Volkov considered her for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough. 1 hour with your son. Then we talk. And Miss Velez? His smile was a threat. If I sense you're lying to me, the deal's off. Understood? Understood. They brought her to Gabriel. The room was small but clean. The grandmother woman handed him over without comment. Selena held her son close, breathing in his smell, feeling his heartbeat against her chest. Mama's got you, she whispered. I promise, I'll figure this out. Somehow. We're going to be okay. But she had no idea how to make that promise true. Outside the room, she could hear Volkov giving orders. Preparing. Getting ready to extract everything she knew about Massimo's operation. Selena held Gabriel tighter and tried to figure out how to betray the man she loved just enough to keep her son alive, but not enough to get Massimo killed. It was an impossible balance, and she had less than an hour to find it. The hour passed like a countdown to execution. Selena sat in the corner of the room with Gabriel in her arms, humming songs she barely remembered from her own childhood, while her mind raced through scenarios that all ended badly. The grandmother woman, Volkov's hired caretaker, sat by the door, knitting something with mechanical precision, occasionally glancing up to make sure Selena wasn't trying anything stupid. There was nothing to try. No windows. One door. Armed men outside. Gabriel had fallen asleep against her chest, his tiny hand curled around her finger. So innocent, so completely unaware that his mother was about to lie to a monster to keep him breathing. When the door opened, Selena's whole body tensed. But it wasn't Volkov. It was Viviana. She entered like she was visiting a museum exhibit, examining Selena with detached curiosity. You look terrible. That cut needs stitches. What do you want? To make sure you understand the situation. Viviana pulled over a chair, sat down with perfect posture. Roman is going to ask you questions. You're going to answer them. Fully. Honestly. No half-truths or clever evasions. Because I'll know if you're lying. You're not even part of his organization. Why do you care? Because Massimo De Luca destroyed my life. Viviana's mask cracked just slightly. 3 years I invested in becoming his wife. 3 years of pretending to love a man who barely knows how to feel. And then he decided sentiment was weakness and threw me away like garbage. So now I'm going to watch him lose everything. His empire, his reputation, his life. And you're going to help me do it. I'm not helping you do anything. Viviana leaned forward. You don't have a choice. You tell Roman what he wants to know, or Gabriel grows up in ways that will break whatever's left of your soul. Simple as that. Massimo will come for us. Massimo thinks you're a traitor locked in his basement. By the time Rosa delivers your little video message, if she even tries, it'll be too late. Roman's men are moving tonight. The moment you give him the security details, they hit the estate. Everyone dies, including Rosa. Viviana smiled. So really, you're choosing who gets to live. Gabriel or everyone at that mansion. What's it going to be? The cruelty of it was breathtaking. There was no good choice, only different flavors of catastrophe. Marco tried to help me, Selena said quietly. You killed him in the street like he was nothing. He was nothing, a tool that outlived its usefulness. Viviana stood up, smoothing her skirt. We all are, eventually, even you, especially you. She left, and 2 minutes later, Volkov entered with 3 men carrying recording equipment. They set up a camera, lights, microphones, making this official, permanent. Put the baby down, Volkov instructed. The grandmother woman appeared to take Gabriel. Selena held him tighter for just a second, one last moment of contact, then forced herself to let go. Gabriel stirred but didn't wake. They carried him out. Selena's arms felt empty. Wrong. Sit. Volkov gestured to a chair positioned in front of the camera. This conversation is being recorded for verification. If you lie, I'll know. If you withhold information, I'll know. And Gabriel pays the price. Clear? Crystal. The red light clicked on. Volkov started with easy questions, confirming details he already knew, the layout of the estate, number of guards, daily routines. Selena answered mechanically, buying time, trying to figure out what she could safely lie about. Then he went deeper. DeLuca's safe room. Where is it? Selena hesitated. The safe room was where Massimo would go if the estate was breached. Giving up that location meant killing him. I don't know. I was never shown. You lived there for months. As a prisoner half the time. You think he gave me a tour of his panic room? Volkov studied her. Viviana said you'd be difficult. Let me rephrase. Where does DeLuca sleep? East wing, master suite, 3rd floor. Access points? Main staircase. Service stairs near the kitchen. I don't know about others. That part was true. She'd never explored the full security infrastructure. When does the guard rotation change? This was where it got dangerous. Selena thought fast. Midnight, 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m. 4 shifts? That's what I observed. Another lie. The rotation was every 8 hours at irregular intervals. But Volkov didn't know that. Wouldn't know until his men hit the estate and found themselves out of sync. The questions continued. Weapons storage, communication systems, backup generators. Selena mixed truth with fiction, giving just enough real information to sound credible while subtly steering Volkov's planning toward mistakes. It was like performing surgery with a blindfold. One wrong cut and everything would bleed out. 2 hours in, Volkov called a break. They brought water and sandwiches. Selena drank but couldn't eat. Her stomach was twisted in knots. You're doing well, Volkov said conversationally. Better than I expected. Most people break down, cry, beg. You're remarkably composed. I've seen worse than you. Have you? He smiled. I doubt that, but we'll revisit the question if you start lying to me. When they resumed, Volkov shifted tactics. Tell me about DeLuca, personally, his weaknesses, what frightens him, what he values most. This was the trap. Any answer revealed too much, but silence was worse. He's afraid of losing control, Selena said carefully, of appearing weak in front of his men. His nephew's death destroyed something in him. He doesn't trust easily, doesn't love easily. Everything is calculated risk. Except you. The words hung in the air. Selena said nothing. He brought you into his home, let you near his operations, defended you against accusations. That's not calculated risk. That's emotion. Volkov leaned forward. What does he feel for you? I don't know. Wrong answer. Volkov pressed a button. On a monitor, Gabriel appeared, awake now, crying. The grandmother woman was holding him, but he was inconsolable, red-faced and screaming. "What does he feel for you, Selina?" Her throat closed. Hearing Gabriel cry while she couldn't reach him was torture worse than any physical pain. "He cares," she forced out. "More than he wants to, more than is smart. He looks at Gabriel and sees something worth protecting. He looks at me and sees—" She stopped. Couldn't say it. "Redemption," Volkov finished. "He sees a chance to be someone other than what he is. That's his real weakness. Not you specifically, but the idea of you. The fantasy that monsters can become men." He turned off the monitor. Gabriel's crying cut off mid-scream. "That fantasy is going to get him killed." Selina's hands clenched. "You have what you need. Let us go. Soon. One more question." Volkov's expression went cold. "If you had to choose between saving DeLuca or saving Gabriel, which would you choose?" "That's not a real question." "Answer it anyway. Gabriel every time, without hesitation. The truth came easily because it was absolute. I'd burn the world down to keep my son safe." "Good." Volkov nodded to his men. "That's what I needed to hear. The rest was just confirmation." He stood. "You've been very helpful, Miss Velez. Almost too helpful. Which tells me you're a better liar than I gave you credit for. But that's fine. I have enough. My men move in 3 hours." Panic spiked through her chest. "You said if I cooperated." "I said I wouldn't hurt Gabriel. I won't. He'll be placed with a family, well compensated to ask no questions. You, unfortunately, are a loose end." He gestured to his men. "Put her with the others." "Others?" They dragged Selina out of the room before she could fight, through hallways that smelled progressively worse, mold and rust and fear, down another level into what looked like a storage area converted into holding cells. They shoved her into one and locked the door. She wasn't alone. 5 women huddled in the corner. Various ages. Various stages of terror. They stared at Selina with hollow eyes that had seen too much. "New girl?" one of them asked. Accent. "Eastern European, maybe?" "They take your baby too?" The words hit like a fist. "What?" "Is how they work. Take babies. Make mothers cooperate. Then sell both." The woman gestured around the cell. "We all have children somewhere in this building. They show us on cameras, keep us quiet, keep us desperate." Horror crashed over Selina in waves. This wasn't just about Massimo. This was human trafficking on an industrial scale. Volkov wasn't just a rival mobster. He was something infinitely worse. "How long have you been here?" 2 months? 3? I lose track. The woman's voice was flat, dead inside. "Some girls, they get sold fast. Some stay longer. Depends on market demand. Sounds like they selling you soon, though. That's what loose end means." Selina's mind spun. She'd given Volkov information, some real, some false, that he'd used to attack Massimo. Gabriel was somewhere in this building being used as leverage against women who had no way to save their children, and she was about to be sold to traffickers who would make her disappear forever, unless she did something, right now. "Is there any way out?" Selina asked. The women laughed, bitter, broken. "Sure, die. That's the exit." Selina examined the cell. Concrete walls, steel door with a small window. No obvious weaknesses. But she'd escaped worse in war zones with less equipment. Her hands went to her hair, finding bobby pins she'd forgotten were there. She straightened 2 of them, bent them into crude lockpicks. It had been years since she'd practiced this, a skill learned from a crazy security consultant in Damascus who'd insisted every field medic should know basic lockpicking. "What are you doing?" one of the women asked. "Getting us out." "Impossible. Guards everywhere. Cameras. Where are you going to go?" "Anywhere but here." Selina knelt by the door, working the makeshift picks into the lock. Her hands shook. The picks kept slipping. But slowly, painfully, she felt the mechanism start to give. "You get out. You take my daughter too," the Eastern European woman said suddenly. "Sophia, 3 years old, brown hair, she in room at end of hall. You promise me. You get her out." "I promise." Selina had no idea how she'd keep that promise, but the woman's desperation was a mirror of her own. The lock clicked open. Selina froze, listening. Footsteps somewhere distant. Voices. But nothing immediate. She cracked the door open, peered out. The hallway was empty. Cameras in corners, but she couldn't worry about those now. Stay quiet, she told the women. When you hear chaos, run. Don't wait. Don't think. Just run and don't stop. She slipped into the hallway before they could argue. The building was a maze. Selena moved quickly, keeping to walls, ducking into doorways when she heard voices. Her head pounded from the injury. Her hands were still shaking, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She found Sophia first, pure luck really, checking rooms systematically. The little girl was asleep in a crib, thumb in her mouth, completely unaware. Selena scooped her up. Sophia stirred but didn't wake. Good. Quiet was survival. Gabriel was 3 doors down. The grandmother woman sat beside his crib, still knitting. She looked up when Selena entered, eyes widening. Don't scream, Selena said quietly. I don't want to hurt you. Just give me my son. They kill me if you take him. They're going to kill both of us anyway. You know that. Selena moved closer. Please. You have grandchildren? Children of your own? Would you want them in this place? Something flickered in the woman's eyes. She looked at Gabriel, at Sophia and Selena's arms, then back at Selena. Down the hall, service exit, leads to loading bay. She handed Selena a key card. Go fast. Don't stop. Selena took Gabriel with her free arm, balancing both children against her chest. Thank you. I never see you. The woman went back to her knitting. I never see nothing. Selena ran. The hallway seemed endless. Sophia was starting to wake, making confused sounds. Gabriel was crying softly. Selena's arms burned from carrying both of them. Behind her, she heard shouting. Someone had discovered the open cell. The service exit appeared ahead. Selena slammed the key card against the reader. Red light. Access denied. No, no, no. She tried again, still red. Behind her, footsteps pounding closer. Selena backed against the door, both children clutched to her chest, and prepared to fight with nothing but desperation and fear. Then the door opened from the outside. Antonio stood there with 4 armed men. Get down! He fired over her head. The men chasing her dropped. Antonio grabbed Selena's arm, hauling her through the door into the loading bay, where 3 SUVs waited with engines running. In! Now! Selena dove into the back seat. Someone took Sophia. Someone else secured Gabriel. Then Antonio was beside her, and they were moving, tires screaming as they rocketed out of the loading bay into night streets. How? Selena couldn't finish the question. Rosa got us your video 20 minutes ago. Mr. DeLuca went ballistic. Marco told us about Viviana before he died. Yes, he lived long enough to talk. We've been tracking Volkov's locations, trying to figure out which warehouse. Antonio checked his phone. Mr. DeLuca's on his way. He's bringing everyone. This is about to get very bloody. Gabriel is fine. Both kids are fine. You're fine, relatively. He looked at her head wound. You need stitches. Later. Selena held Gabriel tight, breathing him in, trying to process that they were out. Safe. Alive. The other women. In the cells. Volkov has them. Already being extracted. We have 2 teams inside. Antonio's expression was granite. Volkov wanted a war. He's getting one. The SUV pulled into an alley. More vehicles were arriving, Massimo's entire force mobilizing. Men checking weapons, strapping on body armor, moving with military precision. Then Massimo appeared. He looked like death personified. Black tactical gear. Blood already on his hands from whatever he'd done to Volkov's outer guards. His eyes found Selena through the SUV window, and something cracked in his expression. Relief and rage and fear all colliding. He wrenched the door open, pulled her out, held her face between his hands like he was confirming she was real. You're alive. Barely. Selena was shaking. I'm sorry. For everything. I gave him information. I had to. Gabriel was... I know. Rosa explained. Massimo's thumbs brushed under her eyes. I should have trusted you. Should have believed you over the evidence. I'm sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have right now. We can talk about it later. Right now, I'm going to kill everyone in that building who touched you. His voice was cold. Final. Starting with Viviana and ending with Volkov. You're going to stay here with Gabriel. Antonio's men will protect you. No. Selena grabbed his tactical vest. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Those women in there, they trusted me. I promised them. And Volkov has recordings of me giving up your security. If he escapes and releases them, everyone thinks I really was a spy. My word against video evidence. I need to destroy those recordings myself. Massimo's jaw clenched. He looked at Antonio, who shrugged. She's right. Evidence needs to be handled carefully. Witnessed. Fine, but you stay behind me. You don't engage, and if I tell you to run, you run. Massimo looked at one of his men. Give her a vest. They strapped body armor onto Selena over her bloody clothes. It was too big, meant for men twice her size, but it was something. Someone handed her a gun. She checked the magazine instinctively, habit from field hospitals, where sometimes medicine wasn't enough. You know how to use that? Antonio asked. Point and pull. I'm a fast learner. Massimo's men were ready. 30 of them, maybe more. An army mobilizing for war. They moved out in formation, Selena positioned in the middle of a protective cluster with Massimo at the front. The warehouse looked different from this angle. Bigger, more fortress than building. But Volkov had been arrogant, hadn't expected retaliation this fast. His security was focused outward, not inward. Massimo's men hit like a hammer. Gunfire erupted across the loading bay. Volkov's guards scrambled to respond, but they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. Massimo moved through them like he was conducting surgery, precise, lethal, methodical. Every shot dropped someone. Every movement was calculated efficiency. Selena stayed in the protective cluster, moving when they moved, stopping when they stopped. The noise was deafening. The smell of gunpowder burned her throat. But they were pushing forward, deeper into the building. They found the cells first. Massimo's secondary team had already extracted most of the women, but 3 were still there, too terrified to move. Antonio's men got them out, while Massimo's group pushed deeper toward the office levels, where Volkov would be making his stand. Viviana appeared in a hallway like a ghost. No weapon. Just that predatory smile. You came. How romantic. She looked at Massimo. Did she tell you? About how she gave Roman everything? Security details, vulnerabilities, everything he needs to destroy you? She told me. Massimo didn't break stride. And I know why, which means she's forgiven. You, on the other hand, are protected by Roman Volkov. Kill me, and you start a bigger war than you can win. I'm already in that war. Massimo's gun came up. You made sure of it. Wait. Selena moved forward. She knows where the recordings are, where Volkov keeps his insurance. Kill her, and we'll never find them all. Viviana's smile faltered. Smart girl. Massimo lowered his gun slightly. Take us to the recordings. All of them. Do that, and I'll let you walk out of here. You're lying. Probably. But it's the only chance you have. Viviana calculated, weighed her options, finally nodded. This way. She led them through corridors Selena recognized from being dragged through earlier, past the interrogation room, up a flight of stairs to an office filled with servers and computer equipment, digital infrastructure for a criminal empire. Everything's backed up here, Viviana said. Multiple redundancies. You'd need to physically destroy the servers to guarantee deletion. Then we destroy them. Massimo gestured to his men. They started pulling equipment, smashing hard drives, setting charges. You're making a mistake, Viviana said. Roman has copies off-site, in cloud storage. Even if you destroy this, where off-site? You think I'm telling you that? Massimo's expression went cold. Last chance. No. Viviana lifted her chin. You'll kill me anyway. At least this way I have leverage. You had leverage. Past tense. Massimo nodded to Antonio. The shot was quick. Viviana dropped, eyes wide with shock, blood spreading across her white blouse. She tried to speak, but only blood came out. Then she stopped moving. Selena stared at the body, feeling nothing. No pity. No horror. Just cold satisfaction that this particular monster wouldn't hurt anyone else. Cloud passwords, Massimo said to the tech guy. Crack them. Delete everything. I want 0 trace. On it, boss. An explosion somewhere below shook the building, then another. Volkov wasn't going quietly. "We need to move," Antonio said. "He's rigged the place, burning evidence." "Where is he?" Massimo demanded. "Probably the roof. Helicopter. It's his standard exit strategy." They ran. Up more stairs, through hallways filling with smoke. The building was coming apart around them. Selina's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. But Massimo pulled her forward, wouldn't let her fall behind. They burst onto the roof to find Volkov already in his helicopter, rotors spinning. He saw them through the windscreen, smiled, waved. Massimo raised his weapon. Volkov lifted something in his hand, a phone, showing a video feed. Gabrielle, still in the SUV down in the alley, a man standing beside the vehicle with something in his hand, a detonator.
"You kill me, Gabriel dies." Volkov's voice came through a speaker. "I walk away, the bomb never arms. Simple choice, DeLuca. Your revenge or her son." Massimo froze. His finger on the trigger, every muscle locked in conflict. Selina saw the calculation happening in his eyes, saw him weighing revenge against an innocent child, saw the exact moment he decided. He lowered his weapon. Smart man. Volkov's helicopter started to lift, but Selina hadn't lowered hers.
She fired. 3 shots. The windscreen spiderwebbed. Volkov jerked back. The helicopter tilted, rotors screaming. It spun once, twice, then dropped off the side of the building. The explosion lit up the night sky. Massimo stared at her. "Gabriel, bluff," Selina's voice shook. "Had to be. Your men wouldn't let anyone near the SUV. He was counting on you not calling it. If you were wrong, then I'd live with it. But I wasn't." She lowered the gun. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. "Is it over?" "Not even close." Massimo pulled her toward the stairs. "Building's coming down. Move!" They ran through smoke and flame, Massimo's men creating a path, holding back the fire just long enough. The structure groaned around them, support beams cracking, ceilings collapsing. They made it to ground level as the upper floors pancaked, out into the loading bay, into the alley where the SUVs waited. Gabriel was fine. Safe in his car seat, the man with the supposed detonator was one of Massimo's guards. No bomb, just good positioning and bluff. Selina collapsed into the back seat, grabbed her son, and finally let herself break down. Great, heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep. Gabriel patted her face with confused baby hands while Massimo held them both, his forehead pressed against hers. "It's over," he said. "You're safe. Gabriel's safe. It's over." But the warehouse was still burning behind them, and somewhere in that fire were recordings that might or might not be fully destroyed. And Volkov's organization, decapitated but not eliminated, would be looking for revenge. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for right now, in this moment, holding her son while the man she loved held her, Selina let herself believe the lie. Just for a minute. Just long enough to catch her breath before the next disaster came. The safe house was 40 miles outside the city, buried in woods thick enough to hide an army. Massimo's men had swept it twice before letting anyone inside. Selina carried Gabriel through the door while dawn broke gray and cold over the trees, painting everything in shades of ash. Inside smelled like pine and old furniture, clean but unlived in, the kind of place kept ready for emergencies that everyone hoped would never come. This qualified. Rosa appeared from the kitchen with coffee and the kind of exhausted relief that came from believing people were dead and discovering they weren't. She took Gabriel without asking, checked him over with grandmother efficiency, then looked at Selina's blood-crusted face and shook her head. "Bathroom. Now. I fix." Selina didn't have the energy to argue. She let Rosa guide her down a hallway into a small bathroom where the older woman cleaned the head wound with steady hands and careful pressure. The cut wasn't as bad as it looked. Scalp wounds always bled dramatically. But it still needed 6 stitches Rosa administered with the skill of someone who'd done field medicine in another life. "You should rest," Rosa said when she finished. "Sleep. Real sleep." "Can't. Not yet." Selina's hands wouldn't stop shaking, adrenaline crash hitting hard. "Too much still. There's too much." "Then sit. Drink coffee. Let your body remember it's still alive." Rosa pressed a mug into her hands. "The men, they handle the rest."
You did your part.
Selena sat on the edge of the bathtub, holding coffee she couldn't taste, while her reflection in the mirror showed someone she barely recognized. Hollow eyes, bruised face, the expression of someone who'd seen the worst of humanity and survived it by becoming something harder. She wondered if that hardness would ever soften again. In the main room, Massimo was on 3 phones simultaneously, coordinating damage control with the precision of a general managing a war. Antonio stood beside him with a laptop, tracking responses from law enforcement and rival organizations. The warehouse fire was all over the news. Authorities were calling it an industrial accident. Nobody who mattered believed that. Volkov's death would create a power vacuum. Other players would move to fill it. Alliances would shift. Violence would ripple outward like waves from a stone dropped in dark water. But for now, in this moment, Massimo's organization had survived. Barely. At terrible cost. The final count came in around noon, 11 of Massimo's men dead, 23 injured. Marco had survived his gunshot wound, barely, and was currently in surgery at a private facility. The women rescued from Volkov's cells were being processed through aid organizations that didn't ask uncomfortable questions. And Viviana's body was currently being identified through dental records because the warehouse fire had destroyed most other identifying features. Selena listened to the reports with numb detachment. Numbers, statistics, lives reduced to logistics. She'd killed someone last night, shot Volkov through the helicopter windscreen without hesitation, watched him fall, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. That should bother her more than it did. "You okay?" Massimo appeared in the doorway. He changed out of tactical gear into jeans and a dark shirt, still had blood under his fingernails. His eyes carried the weight of everything that had happened. Define okay. Selena set down her coffee. "I'm alive. Gabriel's alive. By that metric, I guess I'm great." "Selena, don't!" She stood up. "Don't apologize again. Don't tell me it's over. Don't make promises you can't keep. Just..." Her voice cracked. "Just tell me the truth. All of it. No more protection. No more careful distance. I've earned the truth." Massimo studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Come with me." He led her outside onto a porch that overlooked the woods. Privacy. Space to speak without being overheard. The air was cold enough to burn lungs, clean in a way the city never was. "The recordings Volkov had," Massimo started. "We destroyed the physical servers, but he had cloud backups. My tech people spent the night cracking his security. We found 3 separate storage locations, deleted everything we could verify. But there might be more." "Yes." He leaned against the railing. "Which means the video of you giving him information could surface. If it does, my enemies will use it. Claim you really were a spy. That I'm compromised. That my organization is weak. What would that mean for you?" "Challenges to my authority. Maybe a coup from inside. Definitely moves from other families to take territory." His jaw tightened. "I can survive it, but it won't be clean. There'll be blood. A lot of it. And for me? For Gabriel?" The pause before he answered told her everything. "You'd be a target. Anyone wanting to hurt me would come for you first, as proof of my weakness, as leverage." Massimo turned to face her. "Which is why I'm giving you a choice, right now. Walk away, new identities, money, protected relocation. You and Gabriel disappear completely, start over somewhere safe." The offer hung between them like a door standing open. "Or," Selena asked, "or you stay. With me. Publicly. Make it clear you're under my protection. That touching you means war with my entire organization." His eyes were dark, intense. "But that means living this life. Really living it. No illusions about what I am or what this world requires. You'd be choosing the monster along with the man." Selena looked out at the woods, at the gray sky promising snow, at the isolation that felt both peaceful and suffocating. "If I leave," she said slowly, "Gabriel grows up safe, normal, with a mother who's not looking over her shoulder every day. He goes to regular schools, has regular friends, never knows his father was a crime lord. Yes, but he also never knows you, never has a father, grows up with a hole where that relationship should be. That's the price." Massimo's voice was rough. And I know what I'm asking you to give up. Know what staying would cost you both, which is why I'm not pushing, not manipulating, just giving you the choice I should have given you months ago. The wind cut through Selena's borrowed jacket. She pulled it tighter, trying to gather warmth that felt impossible to find. When I was working refugee camps, she said, I saw families torn apart by violence, mothers who'd walked thousands of miles with children on their backs, men who'd lost everything protecting people they loved. And you know what the worst part was? Not the violence, not the loss. It was the guilt, the survivor's guilt. The constant question of whether they'd made the right choice, whether running was cowardice or courage. Selena, I'm not finished. She turned to face him. I thought I understood sacrifice, thought working in war zones and helping people made me brave, but that was just borrowed courage. I was always planning my exit, always had a way out. Even when I saved your life on those docks, part of me was already planning to walk away, to stay untouched by your world. You couldn't have known. That's not the point. Her hands gripped the railing. The point is I was a coward pretending to be brave, and you saw through it immediately. That's why you kept your distance, why you pushed me away. You knew I wasn't ready for this life. You saved my life twice. That's not cowardice.
No, that's training. Instinct. I did it because I'm a nurse and that's what nurses do. But choosing to stay, choosing you, choosing this impossible, violent, broken life? Selena's eyes burned. That's the brave thing. And I don't know if I have that kind of courage. Massimo moved closer, not touching, just close enough that she could feel his presence like heat. You killed a man last night, he said quietly. To protect Gabriel, to protect me. You didn't freeze, didn't hesitate. You made the hardest choice a person can make and lived with it. That's not borrowed courage, Selena. That's the real thing. I feel nothing about it. The admission tasted like ash. I shot him and felt nothing. What does that make me? Human, in the worst way and the best way. His hand came up, fingertips brushing her jaw. You think I don't carry every death I've caused? Every choice that cost innocent lives? The weight doesn't go away. You just learn to carry it. Or you break. Those are the only options. Then maybe I'm already broken. We're all broken. Massimo's thumb traced her cheekbone. The question is whether we break alone or together. The words hung in this cold air between them. An offer, a promise, a threat, all wrapped into one impossible question. Selena closed her eyes, thought about Gabriel sleeping inside, about Rosa humming while she prepared lunch, about Marco fighting for his life because he tried to help her, about the women rescued from Volkov's cells who now had a chance because she'd refused to stay silent, about Massimo standing here offering her freedom when keeping her would benefit him more. She opened her eyes. If I stay, she said, I need something from you. Anything. Don't protect me from the truth anymore. Don't decide what I can handle. Don't treat me like glass that might shatter. Her voice hardened. I'm staying in this world. I need to understand it. All of it. The violence, the cost, the impossible choices. No more careful distance. You want to see the monster. I want to see the whole person, monster and man. Because if I'm choosing this, I'm choosing all of it. Something shifted in Massimo's expression. Relief, fear, maybe hope. There are things I've done, he said carefully, that you won't be able to forget. Lines I've crossed that can't be uncrossed. Are you sure? I'm not sure of anything. Selena took his hand, laced their fingers together. But I'm tired of running, tired of pretending I can go back to who I was. That woman died somewhere between the docks and Volkov's warehouse. This is who I am now. Might as well be honest about it. Massimo pulled her close, wrapped her in arms that had killed and protected in equal measure, pressed his forehead to hers while their breath mixed in the cold air. This won't be easy, he said. Nothing worth keeping ever is. Gabriel deserves better than this. Gabriel deserves a family. Even a broken one beats none at all. You're going to regret this. But his grip tightened, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. Probably. Selena pulled back enough to look at him. But I'd regret walking away more. At least this way, when things go wrong, and they will, I won't spend the rest of my life wondering what if. When things go wrong, Massimo corrected. Not if. This life guarantees nothing except chaos. Then we'll handle the chaos. Together. She managed something that might have been a smile. Besides, I'm a trauma nurse. Chaos is kind of my specialty. That pulled a real smile from him. Brief, almost invisible, but real. Come inside, he said. Rosa made enough food to feed 20 people, and Gabriel's going to wake up soon wanting you. They went inside together, not holding hands, too public, too vulnerable, but walking side by side like soldiers who'd survived the same war. The next 3 days passed in careful routine. Massimo's men rotated security shifts. Antonio coordinated cleanup operations and managed responses from law enforcement. The news coverage of the warehouse fire gradually faded as news stories took precedence. The city moved on. It always did. Selena spent the time with Gabriel, relearning how to breathe without constant terror. Rosa taught her Italian curse words while they cooked. Marco video called from his hospital bed to complain about physical therapy. The rescued women were being placed in protected programs, their children returned, their lives slowly reconstructing from rubble. And Massimo stopped hiding. He showed Selena the financial records of his empire, the ledgers that tracked protection money and gambling operations, the shipments that crossed borders through creative paperwork, the network of legitimate businesses that laundered money and provided cover. This is what pays for everything, he explained one night, spreadsheets glowing on a laptop screen. The mansion, security, the medical suite, every dollar comes from activities that would put me in prison for life. I know. Do you? Really? He looked at her. Because once you're complicit in knowing, you're complicit in the operation. If law enforcement ever connects you to this, you go down too. Then I guess we'd better not get caught. He showed her the darker operations, the enforcement actions against people who violated agreements, the meetings where violence was discussed with corporate efficiency, the delicate balancing act of maintaining power through controlled brutality. This is the part most people can't stomach, he said. The reality that my world runs on fear as much as money, that sometimes maintaining order requires breaking people. Selena watched, listened, felt her last illusions about what this life meant crumble into dust. How do you live with it? She asked. By believing the alternative is worse, that without structure, without someone maintaining rules, the violence becomes random, uncontrolled. Massimo closed the laptop. I'm not a good man, Selena, but I try to be a less bad one than the alternatives. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her, and somehow, in its broken honesty, it was enough. 2 weeks after the warehouse burned, they returned to the estate. The damage was minimal. Volkov's people had never made it past outer security, but the psychological weight was heavy. 11 empty places at the dinner table, 11 families grieving, the cost of survival written in coffins and trauma. Massimo held a memorial service in the estate gardens. No performances. No pretending the dead were heroes, just honest acknowledgement that they died protecting something they believed was worth protecting, and that their sacrifice mattered. Selena attended with Gabriel in her arms, standing beside Massimo as he spoke about each person by name, told stories that revealed humanity beneath the criminal operations, made sure everyone remembered these were people, not statistics. When it ended, Antonio approached them quietly. The families have been compensated. Triple the standard amount. College funds for the kids, housing assistance, full medical coverage. It's handled. It's not handled, Massimo said. We just put numbers on grief. But it's all I can do. It's more than most would do. Antonio glanced at Selena. You staying? For real? For real. Good. The men need to see stability, need to know this wasn't all for nothing. He walked away before she could respond. That evening, Massimo found Selena in the nursery, rocking Gabriel to sleep. He stood in the doorway watching for a long moment before speaking. There's something you need to see. He led her to his office, closed the door, and pulled up a video file on his computer. My tech people found this in Volkov's backups. It's the full interrogation footage, unedited, everything you told him. Massimo's hand hovered over the play button. I need you to watch it with me, so we both know exactly what information got out, what we're working with going forward. Selena's stomach dropped. Watching herself betray Massimo, even under duress, felt like reopening wounds that hadn't healed. But she'd asked for truth, all of it. Play it. They watched in silence. Selena heard herself mixing truth with lies,
Saw the moment-by-moment calculation as she tried to protect Massimo while keeping Gabriel safe. Saw herself breaking and putting herself back together through sheer will. When it ended, Massimo sat back. "You gave him 4 critical pieces of false information," he said. "Guard rotation times off by 3 hours. Safe room location completely wrong. Backup generator placement fabricated. And you understated my personal security by half." He looked at her. "Under that much pressure, you still protected me." "I tried. I don't know if it was enough." "It was more than enough." Massimo closed the laptop. "Any other person would have broken completely, given up everything just to make it stop. You stayed smart, stayed calculating, gave me a chance to survive even when you thought I'd abandoned you. You did abandon me." The words came out sharper than intended. "You chose your empire over me."
"I did." No deflection, no excuse. "Because I'm a coward in ways that matter. I've built my entire life around not being vulnerable, not giving anyone power to destroy me. And then you showed up and gave me that power without asking for anything in return. It terrified me. And now? Now I'm still terrified, but I'm done pretending fear is the same as strength." He reached for her hand. "I love you. I probably loved you the moment you stitched me together on those docks. And I love Gabriel like he's mine. That makes you the 2 most dangerous people in my life. Because losing you would destroy me in ways bullets never could." The confession hung in the air, raw, undefended. Selena's throat tightened. "You're really bad at this." "At what?" "Emotional honesty. You sound like you're confessing to murder." "I've done that more comfortably than this." But there was something like humor in his eyes. Selena stood up, moved around the desk, and kissed him. Soft at first, then deeper. Pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact, all the fear and anger and desperate need for connection. When they broke apart, Massimo's hands framed her face. "I can't promise you safe," he said, "or normal, or any kind of peaceful future. I know. But I promise I'll fight for you, for Gabriel, for this broken thing we're building, with everything I have." "That's all I need." Selena rested her forehead against his. "Everything else we'll figure out as we go." 3 months later, Selena was back in the medical suite treating a dislocated shoulder when Antonio appeared with news. "Marco's walking again. Full recovery expected." "That's good." Selena finished the wrap. "Tell him to ice it and take ibuprofen. Next." The casualness of it marked how far she'd come. Medical emergencies in a criminal empire had become routine. She knew most of Massimo's men by name now. Knew which ones had kids, which ones were sending money home, which ones were one bad decision from dying young. She'd also started training Rosa in basic emergency medicine, teaching her to recognize symptoms that needed immediate attention versus things that could wait. Building infrastructure so Selena wasn't the only person who could keep people alive. Gabriel had started walking, wobbling around the estate gardens under Rosa's supervision, laughing when he fell, getting up and trying again. Growing up surrounded by armed men who treated him like a prince, learning Italian and English simultaneously, developing his own fierce personality. He'd never remember the warehouse, the fear, the blood. That was both a blessing and a lie they'd have to tell him eventually. One evening, Selena found Massimo standing in the nursery doorway again, watching Gabriel sleep. It had become his ritual. End every day by confirming his family was still breathing. "You're going to give him a complex," Selena said softly. "All this hovering." "Probably, but the alternative is worse." Massimo pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "I keep thinking about that night. If any single thing had gone differently. But it didn't. We survived. That's what matters." "Is it enough? For you?" His voice carried real worry. "This life. This compromise. Are you happy?" Selena considered the question honestly. Was she happy? She was alive. Gabriel was thriving. She was doing meaningful work saving lives that no hospital would touch. She'd found family in Rosa and grudging respect from Antonio. And Massimo, complicated, damaged, dangerous Massimo, loved her with the kind of intensity that felt both terrifying and necessary. It wasn't the life she'd planned, wasn't anything close to normal, but it was real in ways her old life had never been. "I'm not sure happy is the right word," she said finally,
but I'm whole. For the first time in years, I feel like all the pieces of me are in the same place. The nurse, the mother, the woman who fell for someone impossible. It's messy and complicated and probably doomed in 17 different ways, but it's mine, ours. And yeah, that's enough. Massimo kissed the top of her head. You deserve better than enough. Maybe, but I'll take enough with you over perfect with anyone else. They stood in the doorway together, watching Gabriel sleep. Two broken people holding each other up through sheer, stubborn refusal to fall apart. It wasn't a fairy tale. Wasn't even close to safe or sane, but it was survival that looked like love, and sometimes that was the only happy ending worth fighting for. Outside, the gardens stretched toward darkness. Guards patrolled. Life continued. And somewhere in the city, new threats were already forming. But in this moment, in this room, with her son sleeping and the man she loved holding her close, Selena let herself believe in possibility. Not redemption, not salvation, just the possibility that broken things could fit together into something strong enough to last. She'd saved Massimo's life on bloody docks in the rain. He'd given her shelter when she had nothing. They'd destroyed each other and rebuilt something stranger in the ruins. It wasn't perfect. It was just real. And after everything they'd survived, real was the most valuable thing either of them had left to offer. Gabriel stirred in his sleep, making soft sounds. Selena moved to check on him, but he settled back down without waking. Growing, changing, becoming his own person in a world that would try to define him by his circumstances. She'd tell him the truth someday, about how they'd met, about the violence and impossible choices, about how love sometimes looked like survival and survival sometimes looked like love. She'd give him the tools to understand his family's darkness without being consumed by it, but not tonight. Tonight, he was just a baby sleeping peacefully under his parents' protection, innocent, safe, loved. And that was enough. It had to be, because in this world, in this life they'd chosen, enough was sometimes the only victory possible. Selena turned off the nursery light, leaving just the nightlight glowing soft and warm. Massimo closed the door quietly. They walked to their own room, shared now, no more careful distance, and prepared for sleep while knowing guards walked the perimeter and enemies plotted in shadows. Before they turned off the lights, Massimo pulled something from his nightstand drawer. A small box. Worn velvet. I bought this 2 months ago, he said. Been carrying it around trying to figure out when the moment was right. Then I realized there's never going to be a right moment. This life doesn't work that way. He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, a single stone that caught the light. I'm not asking you to marry me, Massimo continued. Marriage is paperwork that makes you a legal target, but I am asking you to belong to me the way I belong to you, completely, permanently, with full knowledge of what that means. Selena stared at the ring, at the impossible offer wrapped in brutal honesty. Is this a proposal or a threat? Both? Neither? Does it matter? She laughed, broken and real. You're really, really bad at romance. I'm aware. Selena took the ring from the box, studied it in the dim light. It was beautiful in an understated way. Practical. Built to last through violence and chaos, like them. She slid it onto her finger, perfect fit. Yes to belonging to you, she said. Yes to permanent and complete. Yes to all the impossible complications that come with it. Massimo pulled her close, kissed her with desperate relief, and held on like she might disappear if he let go. They fell asleep tangled together, protected by walls and guards, and the kind of love that survived because it was too stubborn to die. Outside, the city breathed its nightly rhythms. Crime, commerce, lives intersecting in darkness, Massimo's empire turning its wheels, new threats gathering on horizons. But inside the estate, Gabriel slept peacefully. Rosa hummed in the kitchen preparing breakfast for morning. And two people who'd saved each other in different ways rested in the fragile peace between disasters. It wouldn't last. Nothing ever did in this world. But for tonight, for this moment suspended between violence and hope, it was enough. They'd survived the fire, found each other in the ashes, built something that might collapse tomorrow but stood solid today. And tomorrow, when new threats came, they'd face them together. Broken, dangerous, impossible, but unbreakable in the ways that mattered. Because sometimes love wasn't about being saved, It was about choosing to stand together when the world caught fire, about holding on during the chaos, and trusting that whatever came next, you wouldn't face it alone. Selena had learned that lesson in blood and fear and desperate hope.
Now she'd live it, every day,
For as long as this impossible life allowed. It was enough. It had to be. Because in the end, enough was all anyone could ask for, and more than most people ever found.